On LBC, well, the big Westminster story of the day, in fact, the biggest news story of the day, is surrounding the further release of the Epstein files. 3 million documents have been released. And I was listening to somebody earlier today say that of the 6,000 documents that mention Peter Mandelson, only 300 have actually been examined. So goodness knows what's to come on that front. And Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, as he at the moment still is, clinging on by his fingertips, there will be an attempt to defrock him of his peerage. I'm sure that's the wrong word, but hey, it's the word I'm going to use. If he had any sense, he would resign this evening because he has no future in parliamentary politics any longer. We'll go through some of the things that these emails have revealed. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the picture of him in his underpants, but what I do wonder is, was he not aware that there was someone there with a camera? This is what really I don't understand about all of this. All of these pictures that appear, where have they come from? There's even speculation that this is somehow Russian compromat, which I think is probably one step too far, but who knows? So the question is, why hasn't the Prime Minister already introduced a bill into Parliament to strip him of his peerage? If he's got any sense, as I say, he will actually resign his peerage because it'll be far more humiliating if he has to be stripped of it. But I'm not going to go into the financial whys and wherefores of this because I have Aggie Chambray here, a deputy political editor, who can do that much better than I can. But what she is about to tell you, I think, stinks to the highest order. There is more than a whiff of financial corruption here. And obviously, I have to choose my words carefully. But I believe that there is a very strong possibility that there will be a police investigation in this and that Peter Mandelson could end up in prison for the reasons that Aggie is about to explain. So what is he accused of from these emails?
Well, he is accused essentially of leaking confidential information, among other things. So let's just start with that, Ian. So emails show, number one, he was lobbying to change a tax, a proposed tax as it was then, on bankers' bonuses after encouragement from Jeffrey Epstein. And there was this email discussion which basically shows that Mandelson, encouraged JP Morgan's boss to call the then Chancellor Alistair Darling and, I quote, mildly threaten him. Now, it's worth reminding you that he was business secretary at the time. He was encouraging JP Morgan boss to call the Chancellor and mildly threaten him, something actually that Alistair Darling then wrote about in his autobiography. He forwarded an email sent to Gordon Brown by a special advisor called Nick Butler, disclosing the government was considering selling assets to reduce government debt, which the government later did. Nick Butler's actually come out today and talked about that and said he's shocked and disgusted by the breach of trust and betrayal of confidentiality by Peter Mandelson. He says he wants a full inquiry, and he said Peter should do the honourable thing and resign from the Lords. And also, this is interesting. So a man called Nick Macpherson, who was the permanent secretary at the Treasury at that time, said Alistair Darling, of course the Chancellor, and the official Treasury were always aware that investment banks had an inside track to number 10, but the brazen nature of that inside track is rather breathtaking. And just finally, in May 2010, Jeffrey Epstein emailed Lord Mandelson saying, sources tell me €500 billion bailout almost complete. And there was a reply from a redacted address saying should be announced tonight. And it was a few hours later that massive rescue package was announced. So there are these calls from Plaid Cymru, from the Scottish National Party, from the Liberal Democrats to effectively calling for a police investigation. And we heard from the Prime Minister earlier, and Downing Street has said Sir Keir believes the former ambassador to the US should no longer be a member of the House of Lords or use the title, but the PM himself doesn't have the power to strip him of that privilege.
Well, he does, doesn't he? Because he can introduce legislation.
He could introduce primary legislation in the House of Commons, but the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, appeared before MPs this afternoon, and he gave...
Chief Secretary to the Prime Prime Minister.
You're right, sorry. In my defence, this is a job title that is very recently entered the lexicon. But yes, you're right, Darren Jones is the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. He appeared before MPs to give the government's response to what we've learned about Peter Mandelson since Friday evening and what Starmer thinks the political consequences of those revelations should be.
The Prime Minister believes, as does the government, that Peter Mandelson should not retain his membership of the House of Lords or use his title. As the House already knows, the government does not have the power to remove peerages without legislation. However, the Prime Minister is calling on all political parties, including the Conservatives as the largest party in the House of Lords, to work with the government to modernise the disciplinary procedures to allow for removal of peers who have brought the House of Lords into disrepute. The government will today write to the appropriate authorities in the other place to start that process. It would be better, Madam Deputy Speaker, to update those procedures so that they apply to all members of the House of Lords, instead of having to introduce complex hybrid bills for each individual peer who has brought the other place into disrepute.
Now, Gordon Brown, he's been speaking out, and we should remember he was Prime Minister when Peter Mandelson was Business Secretary and effectively Deputy Prime Minister. He was called First Secretary of State.
Indeed. So Gordon Brown actually said that he had asked for an investigation, or he'd asked for the government to look at these communications back in September. He was told then that there weren't any communications on record, but he has said again today that he's asked the Cabinet Secretary to investigate the disclosure of confidential and market-sensitive information allegedly from Mandelson. And we've got a full statement from him, and he calls the new information shocking.
Aggie, thank you very much indeed. That's Aggie Chambray, LBC's Deputy Political Editor. Joining me in the studio live is Stephen Flynn, SNP leader in Westminster and MP for Aberdeen South. What do you think should happen now, Stephen?
There's been a lot of talk today about peerages and probably not enough talk today about the police and prison, because it certainly feels to those of us who have read through these emails in detail today that there's potentially some serious insider trading going on between a member of the then Labour cabinet with a financier in the States who we of course now all relate to, rightly so, as a notorious international paedophile. These are profoundly serious matters, and I'll be honest with you, I do not feel that the government's response has perhaps risen to the seriousness of the occasion.
What do you think they should have done? I mean, Gordon Brown has asked the Cabinet Secretary to launch an investigation. Surely the current Prime Minister should have done that.
I think the current Prime Minister shouldn't have appointed Peter Mandelson in the first place. This is a matter.
But that's easy to say with hindsight.
No, I don't think it is, Ian, because all of us knew about Mandelson's connections to Epstein in advance. We didn't know the extent of them, of course. We didn't know some of the emails at that time, but we knew that this was a thing. And that was ignored. That was a judgment call, a political judgment call by the Prime Minister. And it's something which I think the victims themselves have reflected upon quite heavily over the course of recent months. And the Prime Minister had to be pushed into removing him from that particular position. I think Keir Starmer should have removed the Labour whip at that time when he removed him from the States. He chose not to do so. Again, a matter of judgment, perhaps a matter of weakness. Today, he could have came to the House of Commons. He didn't. He sent Darren Jones in his stead, despite myself and others' attempts to ask him about this during another statement. He tried to avoid the House of Commons. But what he should have done was front up today and said, I am sorry for the mistakes that I have made. What I am going to do is introduce a bill this evening that will remove the peerage that Lord Mandelson has, and that I agree that the Metropolitan Police should be looking into this issue with the most profound seriousness that it deserves. And I don't believe the Prime Minister has risen to that challenge today.
There's one other thing which I don't think has been discussed today. Is Peter Mandelson still being paid as a government employee through the Foreign Office? Because I know that he certainly was for quite some time after he finished as ambassador, but I don't know whether that's still the case.
Indeed, Alicia Kearns, one of the Tory members of Parliament, asked this question of Darren Jones, and I think she was told that she would get a letter in response. Many of us have asked this question over the course of recent months. Was there a payout? What was the totality of that payout? Was there any NDAs involved? Is he still receiving a salary? So on and so forth. Those questions were asked They were not answered today. You and I can both be certain that Darren Jones, as the minister, would have known whether that's the case or not in advance of going in. So I don't think he did himself a particular service today, despite his obvious political abilities. But look, I think it's important, Iain, just to say to your listeners and to you that the SNP introduced a bill in recent weeks to the House of Commons, my colleague Kirsty Blackman, to allow the Commons to remove peerages from individuals. We did that on the back of the Lord Mandelson situation, but we also did it on the back of Matthew Doyle, Starmer's former spin doctor, being appointed to the Lords, despite his apparent connections and maybe even campaigning for an individual who is now a convicted paedophile in Scotland, a guy called Sean Morton. And we did that knowing that these two things had happened. The Prime Minister, the government could tonight say, you know what, the SNP's bill, we're going to accept it, we're going to give time to it. They're choosing not to, and instead they're saying they're going to change the rules in the House of Commons. That could take weeks, that could take months, for all we know.
Is Peter Mandelson finished in public life now? Because he has a remarkable ability to bounce back from very difficult situations. Now, I can't see, I'm pretty sure he will be effectively excluded from like Hampstead dinner parties, which I'm sure he's been frequenting over the years. I don't think he'll be welcome in so-called polite society.
See, I'm kind of conflicted on this, actually, because the attempted rehabilitation of Peter Mandelson, even in recent weeks since the turn of the year, we've all read about in the paper the fact that he's been dining with former members of the UK government, that he's been at these parties, he appeared on main broadcast on the Koonsberg show, I think it was, to undertake an interview. There was a public interest behind that interview, I would suggest. But it also offered him a platform to try and rehabilitate himself.
See, that's the problem, isn't it? Because, if Peter Mandelson or his people got in touch with my show tomorrow and said, Peter would like to come on and you grill him for an hour, am I going to say no to that? Of course I'm not.
Iain, you'd probably have to join the queue, because I imagine he's going to get grilled by someone else in a much smaller room than this, with no exit tomorrow. Yeah, I would imagine that the Metropolitan Police are looking at this and will, in all likelihood, I would imagine, without seeking to have any sort of political interference in what they do, I would imagine they'll seek to take some action, because, as you said...
But you have actually reported him to the police.
I have reported him to the police. I thought that was necessary this afternoon, because everyone seemed to be talking about it, but nobody had actually done it yet. So we made that decision this afternoon. Of course, I went in the House of Commons and asked the Prime Minister if he agreed with me, and he told me, he gave me an answer about Scotch whisky, an incredibly important topic, of course, but one that allowed him...
He knows how to win you over.
Yeah, indeed. He almost likes whiskey as much as I do, Iain. But he chose not to answer. That was another choice. His judgment, his mess, and he's not taking responsibility.
OK, Stephen, thank you very much indeed for coming in. That's Stephen Flynn, SNP leader in Westminster and MP for Aberdeen South, but maybe not for much longer, because you're standing for the Scottish Parliament elections.
Yes, indeed. I'm seeking to go home to Scotland. I'm sure you'll miss me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure we'll still
I'm not sure the Prime Minister will.
So you fancy being First Minister?
No, I think the First Minister's doing a class job, which is why the SNP is so firmly ahead in the polls, and it looks like we're going to have a fantastic election in Scotland. That's testament to John Swinney, and I'm looking forward to hopefully being a part of his team and whatever guys he sees fit. OK, so Stephen Flynn there. Right, we'll come to your calls. I haven't actually given you a question to answer yet, have I? I'm very well aware of that. So I want to ask you this. Whose responsibility is it to sort this mess out? The Prime Minister's? The King's? Or does this country just have to rely on Mandelson himself doing the right thing? I have to say, it's difficult to imagine yourself in his situation, but I think he would be best advised, if he has friends that are advising him, they would be well advised to say to him, Peter, it's time to quit. Do you agree? 0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes past 7.
LBC. on LBC.
7:20 on LBC. We are asking you, whose responsibility is it to sort this mess out? The King, the Prime Minister, or as somebody points out, the police? Or does this country just have to rely on Mandelson himself doing the right thing? And the other question that we could come to is, why is it so difficult to remove a disgraced peer from the House of Lords? That system really does need changing, doesn't it? 0345 6060 973. Well, let's find out why it is so difficult with Professor Meg Russell, Director of the Constitution Unit at University College London and author of the book The Contemporary House of Lords, Westminster Bicameralism Revived. What a wonderful word that is. Meg, thank you very much for joining us. Why is it so difficult to remove a sitting peer?
Well, it's not, actually. I'm sorry, I would dispute that. I'm finding the government's position on this a bit peculiar. There is a procedure to remove a sitting peer. I mean, two things I would say. Firstly, there's a number of things one could say. Firstly, Peter Mandelson is now on leave of absence from the House of Lords. He's not entitled to participate in House of Lords proceedings at the moment. So there's not a kind of desperate urgency to remove him. If people want him out, he's already out. Secondly, the easiest way for somebody to depart to the Lords is for them to choose to resign, which is what will tend to happen. We don't get very many of these cases, but generally if somebody's in trouble and they're under a great deal of pressure, they will choose to resign rather than need to be removed. But thirdly, there is actually a perfectly reasonable procedure to remove people from the Lords. If you've breached the code of conduct in the Lords, peers can vote to remove such a person if they no longer wish them to be there and think they've reached a kind of standard of unacceptable behaviour. So there's a process in place. I'm a bit puzzled as to why the government is complaining about this. It's much more difficult to take somebody's peerage away, as in their title. But It's perfectly easy to get somebody out of the House of Lords. There was a statute was passed in 2015. It was a private member's bill sponsored by the former Lord Speaker, Baroness Hayman, and it made this available. So if they want to get rid of him, they can get rid of him. They just can't remove his peerage. And if the Prime Minister wants his peerage removed, that will take legislation.
But that seems a bit odd, doesn't it, to have legislation just to remove one person's peerage. Surely Stephen Flynn was right there. They tabled a bill to make that much simpler. The government resisted it for obvious reasons because it really related to one of their new peers. But surely it could be done much more simply.
Yes, well, I think that is a fair point. It is odd that to remove a peerage you have to have a bill, and potentially, I'm not a deep legal expert, but potentially I imagine it might be possible to have a bill to change the process in perpetuity for removing peerages. But you certainly can't move from the position we are now today to somebody's peerage being removed without there being legislation. It might be a good idea to look at all of this. It might be a good idea to change the system for removing peerages in perpetuity, but that would undoubtedly require legislation. Whereas if it's a matter of somebody being in the Lords, Peter Mandelson is no longer in the Lords thanks to leave of absence. That can be made permanent either by him resigning or by him being voted out by the chamber. It's the other things that are harder.
Can you clear up another constitutional point for us? Because I've just before coming to the studio to do this programme, I recorded an episode of the Where Politics Meets History podcast with Tessa Dunlop. And she revealed that, according to her palace sources, the king is incandescent with rage at the Prime Minister. Now, I've no idea who the source was, but apparently it's someone quite high up, because he has thrown his brother under the bus. And I said, well, how does that work? Because he's no longer a member of the royal family. So why would the Prime Minister have to consult the King before making his comments about Andrew having to give evidence or should be giving evidence in America? And she said, well, no, he's still a member of the royal family, even though he's a private member of the royal family. I mean, constitutionally, would the King have any right to be angry at what the Prime Minister has said? Sorry, it's a bit convoluted.
I'm not sure whether you can rule constitutionally on whether somebody's allowed to be angry or not.
No, but you know more about the relationship between the monarch and the Prime Minister than I do, so I thought I'd try and pick your brain.
Well, maybe what they're getting out there is that there are some conventions about politicians sort of not not talking about the royal family and undermining the royal family. But we are in a rather unusual situation here, as you say, because Andrew has already been stripped of his title. So I suppose he's in a position where, I don't know, maybe the normal conventions of what you can say about members of the royal family don't apply. But this is all pretty unprecedented stuff that we're seeing at the moment. I would say, if we're looking at the Lords, the House of Lords should not be blamed for what has happened here. And the House of Lords should not be blamed for having inadequate procedures. I think its procedures for removing people are perfectly reasonable now as of the last 10 years.
I suppose.
But if we're unhappy about things like the links between the peerage and membership of the House of Lords, if we're unhappy with how people get appointed to the Lords and removed from the Lords, I am all up for looking at that. I've been saying for years that these things need looking at. We need a more regularised process of getting people into the Lords, and it's fair enough to have a regularised process for getting them out. But the government needs to decide to legislate on these things and take it seriously.
I suppose the point behind the question was, do you consider Andrew still a member of the royal family, or the fact that he's lost all of his titles, does that mean that he no longer counts as one?
I suppose there's a constitutional question and a kind of interpersonal question.
Yeah.
He's clearly a member of a family. He clearly remains the brother of the king. But officially, I think he is no longer a member of the royal family because he's not a working royal.
But he's still eighth in line to the throne. I suppose that probably confirms Tuss's point.
It's a complicated one.
Well, if you find it complicated, I'm quite proud that I do too. Thank you very much indeed. That's Meg Russell there, Professor Meg Russell, Director of the Constitution Unit at University College London. Alan says, Iain, I and many professionals on LinkedIn wondered why the Dark Prince Mandelson was appointed as ambassador to the USA. When you see his ties to Epstein, MIT, why shouldn't someone be linked to MIT? Ehud Barak and Mossad. Really? And Trump and Putin and Blair, what is going on? It is the bankers who hold all of the information that would open a real can of worms. Well, I think there's a few little exaggerations, though, if you don't mind me saying so, Alan. I'm not quite sure what your evidence is for the link to Mossad or Putin. Of course, we know his links to Blair. He was one of Blair's chief advisors. And let's remember, he was known as the Prince of Darkness for very valid reasons back in the 1990s and the 2000s, because he was a figure that most media people feared. He intimidated the media. I have to say that although I wasn't a journalist at the time, I always found him a sort of slightly amusing figure rather than intimidating figure. But if you were the political correspondent of one of the national newspapers and you crossed Peter Mandelson, that would not have done your career any good at all. So I think he got away with an awful lot in the 1990s and 2000s, and was very keen to ingratiate himself with the establishment, with high society, and with rich people. And that is a fatal concoction. It's quite dizzying, I suppose, in many ways. He didn't come from that kind of background. And I think when you become the life and soul of whatever party you're going to and the most honoured guest there, it probably goes to your head. And I think that is partly what's happened with Peter Mandelson. He always was bewitched by people with money, and we remember the Jeffrey Robinson loan for his mortgage, don't we? The first resignation. We remember trying to get passports for the Hinduja brothers, very rich brothers from India. Again, all about money. This, in many ways, is all about money again. And it seems to be Peter Mandelson's fatal character flaw. I mean, this is not about Peter Mandelson being accused of any sexual impropriety. But, I mean, who knows what's to come out of these other emails? As I say, only about, I think it's 300 of the 6,000 relating to him have actually been examined so far. So I don't know what more there is to come out. I'm not sure even whether Peter Mandelson knows what more there is to come out. He's denying that he has any knowledge of money that was mentioned in these emails that went into his bank account while he was a cabinet minister and shortly afterwards. the amount of money is almost inconsequential. The fact that money appears to have changed hands is important. Now, just breaking, the Metropolitan Police says this evening that it has received a number of complaints relating to alleged misconduct in public office following the release of the Epstein files. The Met says that the report will all be reviewed to determine if they meet the criminal threshold for investigation. Well, I would say this. A Prime Minister recently lost his job because of an investigation by the Metropolitan Police into something that, compared to this, I would argue was relatively inconsequential. He got a £50 fixed penalty notice. That is not what we're talking about here. And while I'm very careful not to find people guilty before they've been had a fair court hearing, I mean, the penalties for misconduct in public office and the other things that Peter Mandelson is being accused of, they're not £50 public sort of fixed penalty notices. So I think we should possibly all bear that in mind in our discussions. 0345 6060 973. Why do you think it's so difficult to remove people from the House of Lords? And whose responsibility is it? Because a lot of you on the text are questioning whether Peter Mandelson should have been appointed ambassador in the first place. Now, we can all say this with hindsight. My recollection is that I thought this was probably a good appointment when it happened. I wasn't particularly aware of his connection with Epstein. And I don't think I think a lot of people knew that they knew each other, but nobody realised that the relationship went as deeply as it clearly did. So I think there are lots of questions to answer. There are lots of things to come out of this. But in the end, is Keir Starmer the one that is emerging from this? Again, as a weak Prime Minister who hasn't taken the decisions, having made the initial decision to appoint Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the USA, has he really done what he needed to do? And let's not forget, when he was sacked as ambassador, he didn't lose his salary. He was still employed by the Foreign Office. And I think it is incumbent on the government to tell us whether he is still being employed by the Foreign Office and how much money he continues to receive and why that hasn't been stopped. 0345 6060 973. Well, in a moment, we'll find out more about the serial killer Steve Wright, who's pleaded guilty to the murder of a sixth victim. It's 7:32 on LBC News Headlines with Daryl Jackson.
Within the last few minutes, the Metropolitan Police says it is aware of the latest release of files related to Jeffrey Epstein and confirmed it's received a number of reports relating to alleged misconduct in a public office. In a statement tonight, they say the reports will all be reviewed to determine if they meet the criminal threshold for investigation. Pressures mounting on Lord Mandelson this evening over allegations he handed sensitive government information to the sex offender when he was business secretary. Serial killer Steve Wright has admitted to murdering 17-year-old Victoria Hall in Suffolk more than 25 years ago. He's already serving a whole life term for the murders of 5 other women. And Palestinians are entering the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. The reopening's part of the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire and will see only 50 Palestinians crossing each day. LBC weather: rain will spread into southwestern England and Wales into tonight, with local flooding possible. Spells of rain continuing in the northeast of the UK, a low of 0.
This is LBC.
Chase is the
Shaping Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:35 on LBC. Pauline says, I can't wait for you and Dr. Tessa to cover Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor on your podcast. The history side should be very interesting. Also, Keir Starmer's judgment needs questioning. And that's Pauline in Dulwich. Well, we spent most of the podcast recording this afternoon. It'll be out at 1 o'clock in the morning on your podcast feed where politics meets history. Do subscribe so you automatically get it on your phone. We'll come back to talking about Peter Mandelson in just a moment. But first, the serial killer Steve Wright has pleaded guilty to kidnapping and murdering a 17-year-old girl more than 25 years ago in Suffolk. Victoria Hall's naked body was found 5 days after she had enjoyed a night out in Felixstowe in September 1999. Well, let's get more on this from our reporter Joseph Draper. Joseph, very good evening. What's been happening in court today?
Well, I think there was some real shock in the courtroom when Steve Wright actually pleaded guilty today to the murder of 17-year-old Victoria Hall. We had expected him to go to trial with those allegations. She disappeared over 25 years ago, but he did, as I say, finally admit to kidnapping and murdering the teenager from Trimley St Mary in Suffolk in September 1999. And he also pleaded guilty to attempted kidnap of another woman, Emily Doherty, then aged 22, in Felixstowe, just 1 day before that as well. Of course, as you say, a prolific serial killer, already serving a whole life sentence for the murders of 5 other women who he strangled in a killing spree. That was years later, though, in Ipswich in 2006. So this very much broadens the scope of his offending. Experts warning there could have been more victims in the wider Suffolk area. And crucially, Iain, this is the first time he's ever actually admitted to any of his killings. And it comes after years of pleas from the victims' families for him to come clean about his crimes. Clearly, then, this will be a partial relief, I think, for Victoria's loved ones. We know the sixth former left her home for a night out with friends at a nightclub. That was the last time she was seen alive, but 5 days later she was found in a ditch 25 miles away. And it's a bittersweet day, I'm sure, for her family. Tragically, her mother, Lorinda Hall, died last year before he was brought to justice. But as I say, he will now be sentenced for her murder on Friday.
Joseph, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get more on this from Dr. David Holmes, criminal psychologist, who is the author of the book Abnormal, Clinical and Forensic Psychology. David, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us on LBC. What conclusions do you draw from the fact that he has pleaded guilty today to this? Because I think there's quite a large gap between this murder and the next one.
Yes, I think this is the key factor. The idea that he was killing, some years, quite a few years, prior to the killing of the 5 prostitutes, which he managed to accomplish in 6.5 weeks after moving into an address in the area. The chances of someone hitting the ground running with 5 killings in a very short period of time is likely to have killed before. Now you've got confessed evidence, at least, of him killing before. So therefore, there's a big question mark over how many others are there that Steve Wright could account for.
But presumably Suffolk Police have examined this in minute detail and looked to see if there are any other unsolved murders during that period.
Yes, well, they will have done, and they will have been producing evidence. There's many supposed killings that could have been carried out. I mean, even Susie Lamplugh, for whom they got James Cannan as the guilty party, was a very great possibility. It could have been Steve Wright. I mean, they actually were on a cruise ship, QE2, together. And they were associated, and her body has never been found. So this stretches right back into the 1980s, where there are suspect cases that could have been accounted for by Wright done in a fairly similar style. His style of killing was that of someone who was experienced and forensically aware because of experience of making mistakes previously and so on, to the point where, he's very, very likely to have killed more.
And the fact that all of these murders took place within a sort of comparatively small area in Suffolk, would that lead you to, given your background, would that lead you to believe that any other murders would have been in that area, or they could have been anywhere?
They could have been, almost anywhere. He could have travelled, but he did move around quite a bit as well. So, and there are murders in the areas that he kind of worked in or moved to. There's a number of unsolved murders in Norwich, and the victims are often fairly well targeted. So you're apparently getting half the story of a very experienced serial killer who picks on the kind of what we call less than dead type victim, which is a term, it's a very crude term, but it comes from the Mexican border where bodies were found regularly. And in fact, rather than just even investigating them, they weren't even reported because they were, as it were, not really missed much, not important people, i.e. less than dead. And prostitutes come under the same heading. They're often not missed for days. So someone who is highly forensically aware would target that kind of person.
And I think I'm right in saying that the young lady whose murder he's pleaded guilty today for was not, Victoria Hall was not involved in that activity.
No. This is more opportunist stuff. But just shows that, you can't just purely and simply look for that type of victim. Clearly, that's where he ended up. And heaven knows how many people he thought he could carry on killing. The rate he was killing them at was phenomenal. He had that basic hatred of women and psychopathy that meant he was indifferent to their consequences.
This seems very similar to the Yorkshire Ripper case, doesn't it?
It does have some similarities in that, it was kind of on a mission almost to kill and to kill as many as possible. With no remorse whatsoever. I mean, remorse would be a very strong term for Steve Wright. But it's somebody who really had to be stopped, who had to be prevented for life from having access to individuals that he could predate on and kill.
David, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. David Holmes there. His book is called Abnormal, Clinical and Forensic Psychology. Right, back to your calls on Peter Mandelson. Who's at fault here for what's happened? The Prime Minister, the King, the police? Whose responsibility is it to sort this mess out? Nick is in Vancouver. Nick, hi.
No, hi, Ian. I mean, if anything would indicate that it's time to get rid of the House of Lords and go over to an elected system where if the voters choose a bad one, well, at least it's down to the voters and not down to the Prime Minister. If you're going to have a system where you reward people that do favours for the party, you're going to end up putting an awful lot of scumbags in the House of Lords. And that's been the history of the institution. It's full of grifters.
Well, I think, you're grossly exaggerating to make a point. I think to use this example as a reason to abolish the House of Lords, I mean, fine, you can add it to reasons, I suppose, but it can't be the main reason.
It would be for me. I mean, you add Peter Mandelson to, Lord, what's his name, of Vladivostok. You've got bloody Russians in there whose only sort of service to the UK is to shove, stuffed envelopes.
Yeah, but then you've got people who've served
towards parties.
Yeah, but then you have people like Tanny Gray-Thompson, and there are loads of other lords that have got there entirely on merit. Yes, they are appointed. I completely agree, but you can't just say you abolish an institution because of one bad apple.
Well, it's not one bad apple, though.
Well,
the institution itself is outmoded. I mean, Is Peter Mandelson better than you and I? That's what a Lord means. He's superior to the rest of us. No, he's not. If someone gets there on merit, they'll be elected by their local electorate. That's how you should get to anywhere on merit, is, in the political system, people should vote for you. It shouldn't be because you did huge favours for the Conservative or the Liberal Democrats or the Labour Party.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
It's a system that will breed corruption.
Well,
by its nature, it will breed corruption.
I agree with you to the extent that the House of Lords, as it's currently constituted, it is no longer fit for purpose and it needs to be reformed. And I think you're right; it probably has to be elected. But I don't think that this one example should necessarily mean that we immediately have to decide to get rid of it. 7:46 on LBC.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We talk about Peter Mandelson. Will he face criminal sanction for his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? And on Jeffrey Epstein, how could it be that his tentacles ran so deep all across the world?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:49 on LBC. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question in just 11 minutes' time. Sir Simon Jenkins, columnist for The Guardian, who's also former editor of The Times and The Evening Standard. Laura Beveridge, making her debut, political correspondent for Politics Joe. Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North. And Lincoln Chopp, Conservative MP for Spelthorne, a former senior officer in the British Army. So they'll be here answering your questions from 8 o'clock. The lines are open now if you'd like to ask them a question. Can't imagine what you'll be asking tonight of all nights. 0345 6060 973. Now let's talk a little bit more about the situation that Peter Mandelson has landed himself in. I was about to say finds himself in, but let's face it, he's landed himself in it. Max Wilkinson is Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokesperson and MP for Cheltenham. Max, welcome. What questions do you think the government has to answer on this? Because we could all see that Peter Mandelson has done quite a few things that we could take issue with. But do you think the government have handled this in the proper way?
Well, good evening, Ian. Good to be on. The first thing I think we all need to say when talking about this is that the victims and survivors of Epstein's abuse are the ones who need the justice here. Peter Mandelson's role in this, I think most people will be able to judge for themselves based on the release of the documents. Now, it is within the government's gift to bring forward legislation to strip him of his peerage. Darren Jones in the Commons this afternoon wasn't really being drawn on that. He was just saying that we need to make larger reforms, right? And obviously, as a Lib Dem, I'm in favour of reforming the House of Lords. But that isn't the point here. The point is that Peter Mandelson has done enough to warrant legislation to strip him of his peerage. And let's face it, if he had any shame, he would just quit now. He would give up his title and he would give up being a member of the House of Lords.
Why do you think he hasn't done that? Because having resigned twice from the government before, you would think he'd be quite attuned to knowing when the game was up.
Well, you wonder, don't you? I guess he's a man from the rough, tough political world where you just tough things out sometimes. I think this is one of those occasions when he shouldn't be, particularly when I think it's fairly likely that the police are going to be looking at this, right? The content,
they've confirmed it in the last few minutes.
Great. Well, the content of those pieces of correspondence between him and Jeffrey Epstein are totally damning, right? And then when you look at the flows of cash between him and Epstein as well, it only points...
Which he denies. We should point that out.
Which he denies. But there are things here that make people draw their own conclusions, right? Now, Peter Mandelson at the moment apparently is not answering any questions from the media, but he ought to front up. He ought to quit his place in the House of Lords, and if he doesn't, the government needs to wield the axe and actually bring forward that legislation, and Liberal Democrats are considering our options as far as that goes.
Devil's advocate question here coming up. Do you think sometimes in these circumstances politicians and the media are almost like a lynch mob, and they want their pint of blood and they're determined to get it, and that can actually have sometimes some quite unintended consequences?
Well, I think one of the key roles for those of us involved in politics is to hold the powerful to account. One of the reasons I'm a Liberal is because I think that, when there are powerful people, they need to be subject to questions. And in this case, you've got one very powerful man, Peter Mandelson, and his relationship to another extremely powerful man who was using his wealth and his power and his influence for ill. And those things that were done by Jeffrey Epstein to those women and girls are absolutely disgusting. Now, the government was well aware that Peter Mandelson had a friendship with Epstein when they appointed him as the ambassador to America, one of the most important roles that this country has on the foreign stage. There are questions to be answered around that. But of course, in these circumstances, what needs to happen is proper justice for those women and girls, and also that Peter Mandelson does the right thing, and if he won't, the government must do it for him.
See, we've already stripped him of his peerage by referring to him as Peter Mandelson, haven't we?
This is one of those occasions on which you get warned, don't you? You get told, don't say anything defamatory. Well, can the reputation of Peter Mandelson be lowered by anything that we might say? I'm not going to test that because I don't want to put the LBC lawyers at risk, and I don't want to put myself and you at risk either, Ian. But it is a question that's worth asking because I'm not totally certain that anything we could say on the show tonight would lower the estimation of Peter Mandelson in the minds of people listening at home. And that is really, really difficult, isn't it?
And he will hate that because he is actually, I know him a little bit, not very well, but he's a very proud man, and he's always wanted to be seen as a player, hasn't he? Well, he no longer is a player, and I don't think he can come back from this, and he never will be a player in the political or media scene either. And what will hurt him most is that he will no longer be invited to all these posh dinner parties that you and I don't get invited to. Well, maybe you do.
The best dinner parties I have are with my wife at home, just the two of us, because as a politician, you don't get to spend enough time with your family.
It's probably safest that way.
If my daughter's there as well, then all the better. But I guess this is one of those things, right? What was it that first attracted the politician Peter Mandelson to the billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, right? He's not alone in that, is he? I mean, no. We can all think of other examples of people who maybe haven't been corrupted by closeness to power and wealth, but have come pretty close to that flame.
And this is the difficult point, isn't it? Because actually the use of public office for private gain, that is the very definition of corruption. Now, what will come out over the coming weeks and months about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the extra stuff that we don't already know, that's to be seen, isn't it? But in those emails that have been released over the weekend by the Department of Justice in America, it looks really bad. It is really bad.
And they've only scratched the surface because there are many, many more to come.
Millions more to come.
OK, Max, we have to finish there. Thank you very much indeed. That's Max Wilkinson, Liberal Democrat, Home Affairs spokesperson and MP for Cheltenham. Right, let's go to Michael, who's in Eastbourne. Hello, Michael.
Oh, hello, Ian. Nice to speak to you again. Yes, I'm hoping that this episode will be the last we ever see of Peter Mandelson, because his whole career has done nothing but to bring the Labour Party, I'm a Labour supporter, he's just brought it into not accidental, but he's just brought it into disrepute, you know. But what I was phoning to say is money. Money.
It's a rich man's world.
Exactly. Well, I was thinking of the song in Cabaret, you know, a mark again, a buck and a pound. Well, that's what makes the world go round. And I by no means do I mean to minimalise the sexual problems involved in the Epstein files, you know, with whoever may or may not have involved. But it's all cash. I mean, that's what they really wanted. Fergie, Andrew, you know. And the thing that really gets me is why do we think that Trump has, because they've only released half the papers. So what's in the rest? And we know that there are allegations against Trump in the ones that have been released. So why do we think that he has used the presidency to amass a war chest of cash?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there.
Well, I'm referring to the fact that I think there is much, much worse stuff to come out in the other 3 million papers.
Well, that may well be true. And of course, I was reading earlier today that somebody has worked out an AI program that will show what's been redacted. I don't know how that works, but that might be quite interesting too.
Yeah, it's all money. And that's, I mean, as I say, what we know, ostensibly, we know there's these sexual allegations against Epstein, but we don't know the full extent of his financial favours, not just to Fergie and Andrew and whoever else. That's the stuff that needs to come out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting way you put that because, of course, we've been concentrating on Peter Mandelson for obvious reasons over the last 24, 48 hours. But there are more allegations against Prince Andrew, including some pretty odd photos, it has to be said. Michael, thank you very much indeed. On Monday's Cross Question, in just a few moments' time, we will be welcoming Sir Simon Jenkins into the studio, columnist for The Guardian. Laura Beveridge is political correspondent for Politics Joe. Catherine McKinnell is Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North. And Lincoln Job is Conservative MP for Spelthorne. They'll be here to take your calls, 0345 6060 973. You can ask about anything you like, including the Epstein files, including Peter Mandelson. But let's not do the whole programme on that, shall we? There are plenty of other things to talk about as well. And of course, you can watch us. You can watch the whole programme now, all 3 hours of it, live on Global Player, the LBC app, and of course, the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the SNP's leader in Westminster, Stephen Flynn, has told LBC he's reported Lord Mandelson to the police.
I thought that was necessary this afternoon because everyone seemed to be talking about it, but nobody had actually done it yet. So we made that decision this afternoon. Of course, I went in the House of Commons and asked the Prime Minister if he agreed with me, but he chose not to answer. That was another choice. His judgment, his mess, and he's not taking responsibility.
It's after the latest release of files relating to Jeffrey Epstein in the US appeared to show he passed sensitive market information to the late paedophile. The Met Police says it's received a number of reports relating to alleged misconduct in a public office, which will be reviewed. A serial killer's admitted to killing another victim in Suffolk 25 years ago. Steve Wright, who's already serving a whole life term for the murders of 5 other women, pleaded guilty to the kidnap and murder of 17-year-old Victoria Hall. Resident doctors in England have voted to renew their mandate for industrial action for another 6 months. It's over their ongoing row with the government over pay and jobs. And Yvette Cooper's welcomed the opening of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. The Foreign Secretary says more needs to be done to let aid into the territory. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 51 points at 10,275. The pound buys $1.37 and €1.16. LBC weather. Rain will spread into southwestern England and Wales tonight. Rain continuing in the northeast. Lows of 0. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's Monday evening on LBC, 2 minutes past 8. Welcome to Cross Question. On the panel with me tonight, to my left, Laura Beveridge, political correspondent for Politics Joe, making her debut on the programme. Next to her is Lincoln Jopp, Conservative MP for Spelthorne. To my right, Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North. And Sir Simon Jenkins is next to her, columnist for The Guardian, former editor of The Times and The Evening Standard. They're here to answer your questions. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number too, or text 84850. And of course, you can watch us live on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Let's go to our first caller. It's Stephen in East Grinstead. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, good evening, Ian. Good evening, panel. With the alleged transfer of money and sensitive information between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, are we finally seeing the downfall of Peter Mandelson?
Simon.
I think the answer is yes. I do feel sorry for people under this sort of pressure, I have to say, and I did feel slightly sorry for him until now. What's happened is clearly outrageous. We not comment on it on the air, but this is a long time ago.
No, we can comment on it.
All right, it is a long time ago. I feel it's been grossly overdone the last 3 days. I couldn't turn on the radio without hearing the word Peter Mandelson and Epstein again. I don't know, there are other rather important things happening in the world at the moment.
Why do you think it's been overdone? I mean, he's basically being accused of corruption.
It is indeed. He's been accused of corruption long ago. It's a serious matter. It's going to be looked into. Whether it's more important than the Iranian crisis, whether it's more important than all the other things that are happening, I really doubt. And I do think there are times like this when our profession does get together, as you implied earlier on, and has a sort of field day on a particular topic.
Do you think, I mean, just on that, I think there may be a little bit of feeling of payback in the media, because during the Blair years, and indeed since then, I mean, he is a figure that has delighted in intimidating the media, isn't he? I mean, you will remember this from your days as editor.
He did. He didn't delight in it quite as much as some other people who are doing rather well at the moment, like Alistair Campbell. It is not that special, I don't think. I really don't. I mean, I'm not feeling sorry for him in any sense. And it is important that we hold these people to account, and that's what's happening now. As for getting him out of the House of Lords, I mean, when you think of some people there, what they've been up to, this is really slightly extreme. So I don't know. I think we're overdoing it. I really do.
Catherine.
I'm appalled. I really am. I recognise that there is often a frenzy around these things, and that's can be very difficult for the individuals involved, and it does become a sort of a self-feeding machine. But I have to say, I gasped when I saw some of those revelations today. And I am appalled. There's no other words for it. And I think the thing that grieves me most is that this focus on these revelations, and the police are now looking into it, quite rightly so, and the focus on Peter Mandelson as an individual, the thing that makes me most angry is that is taking away the focus on these girls and these women that have suffered so much.
What angers me is the fact that he was doing all this when he was Deputy Prime Minister and Business Secretary at a time when the MP's expenses scandal was happening. And you would have thought that something might have clicked in his mind, so, well, does this pass the sniff test? But it clearly didn't. What do you attribute that to?
My big fear, and I appreciate I'm not directly answering your question because I do not know. I do not relate to it. I do not understand it, and I cannot accept it. And I just want the public to know that it is not normal, it is not acceptable, and it is not how politicians behave. It's not how the vast majority of public serving of all parties, politicians behave. It's not okay.
I mean, if I may say so, you really feel this, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Because do you regard it as basically, it's another way for the electorate to think, well, they're all the same, they're all up to this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what makes me angry, because I know how frustrated the public are. I talk to my constituents, I receive their emails, we knock on doors. I know how they feel about politics at the moment, and we have a huge job to rebuild that trust, whether that's in government and what government does, and to talk about good things and positive change that needs to happen, whether it's on a cross-party basis. And, Lincoln's here, and he's a very genuine and sincere and public-serving politician. And I think we are all set back by this, and democracy is set back by this, and we can see it rocking both here in the UK and in the United States, and it just makes the job harder of getting good things done.
Laura Beveridge.
I think that this poses massive questions to the current Labour government itself. There is a question on, was there a failure in vetting? And if not, why was he appointed in the first place? Because it was a matter of public record since 2023 that Peter Mandelson had maintained a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted for soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. And we know with the first release of the Epstein files back in September, that Peter Mandelson said he would fight for his early release. And obviously that led to him no longer being ambassador.
But to be fair to the Prime Minister, he couldn't have known any of this at the time. Well, he obviously knew about the fact that there was a relationship subsequent to Jeffrey Epstein being released from prison, but he couldn't have known the kind of details that we're now finding out.
I think there has to be questions about why was Peter Mandelson appointed as ambassador, given his record, not just with his relationship and what was known with Jeffrey Epstein, but also his record when he was in government himself. This is a man who had to resign twice, once over a secret loan, and second because he was accused of helping a foreign billionaire secure a passport, which I later believe he was cleared of wrongdoing in. But Peter Mandelson's weakness has always been that he has sought and revered power and wealth, and he's sought to be close to that, whether that is going on a yacht with an oligarch or accepting a cruise from an Italian millionaire.
What about the point that Simon made, that we're obsessing about this almost to the extent of other things, which in the wider scheme of things are probably more important?
I think it goes back to what Catherine said about trust in politics. I think trust in politics is probably at one of its lowest points it's ever been. I go out and speak to voters a lot for my job. I go out and speak in lots of different constituencies, and the thing I do hear...
You're a rarity among political journalists if you do that.
The thing I hear time and time again is they're all the same. And I find it hard to disagree with them when on one side of the Lord you've got Michelle Mohan, whose PPE MedPro, the BBC reports, might never pay back the 148 million it owes the UK government, and on the other side you've got a man who chose to continue a relationship with a convicted paedophile.
Lincoln Job.
Well, firstly, Catherine's absolutely right, of course, that our first thought should be always with the victims. And I'm going to take slight issue with you, Ian, about your statement that the Prime Minister could never have known the information which has come out. And the reason why is this, and we had an hour and a half in the House of Commons today questioning the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. When he was originally sacked as the British ambassador to the United States, I stood up and said, look, someone has had politically fatal compromat on Peter Mandelson for his entire time. So he basically could be subject to leverage or blackmail. And I said, if it had turned out that he was a Russian or a Chinese spy, the security service would have been all over him and turning him inside out, talking to every single person that he met, every decision he'd sought to influence. And the line I got from the government was, well, he's been sacked. And I suspect that if they had actually gone full bore at the time when he was sacked and looked at this, his case much more thoroughly and asked the Department of Justice for any information that they had on him, that this could well have emerged and that they could have found out.
Simon?
I don't know what to say except what I've already said, which is we're going on and on and on this one. This happened a long time ago. There must be a dozen scandals that we have not been discussing. There was an outrageous story in the Times today about the government lying about the NHS waiting list things. I mean, it was outrageous. I mean, the Prime Minister apparently telling a lie. And are we talking about that? No. There's so many.
Well, if people bring in and ask about it.
Well, they do. But I mean, we're obsessed with going back in history. I mean, the number of public inquiries now running into scandals in the past is almost absurd. It's like the West End theatre.
But you can't really say that this doesn't merit public discussion.
The question is, and this is an obsession of mine, I have to tell you, about the journalistic profession, and it applies to broadcasting in general, is how do you decide how much time you give to something? It's not that it's not important. It's that you have to have some sort of balance. I mean, is the NHS completely unimportant compared to Peter Mandelson? No, it's not unimportant. Is the same applies to, the Grenfell Tower thing going on and on and on. Hillsborough is still going on. All these things go on and on and on. And for some reason, because they've got a sort of electricity to them, they grab our attention. And we in that sense, give in to what's sensational.
Catherine, you're shaking your head.
Well, I'm pretty hardened. I've been a member of Parliament for, coming up for 16 years. And
you're looking very well on it, may I say.
Thank you very much. And in my time, I have very rarely gasped when I read a news story, because most times you see things coming, or you've heard it before, or you can see both sides. Not on this. I'm sorry, I do disagree, and I think there's a reason why it has rocked the public. And I think, actually, to dismiss it as not serious, I think does more damage to the public perception of politics itself. I think as politicians, we have to call it out and say this is not acceptable. It is totally unacceptable. And I think that, yes, it's all bound up with the terrible events and behaviour of Epstein himself and also Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And yes, they are public figures and well known, so there is interest in it. But in and of itself, it is a story worth reflecting on and doing something about. And I think that's the point.
I think I agree with you, all right? The question is, how many times do you have to say it?
In fairness, the reason why we're talking about it today is because the government made a statement in the House of Commons. And I can tell you now that if they hadn't voluntarily made a statement, we would have asked an urgent question about it, because the public are very concerned about it. It speaks to the Prime Minister's judgment in appointing Peter Mandelson in the first place. And indeed, it speaks to their processes of vetting. And I think those are all legitimate concerns, and it's quite right that we examine them.
Robbie in Chelmsford has a question on this as well. Robbie, go ahead. You might incur Simon's wrath, but...
Yes, just to pass the bar of importance, what I wanted to focus this on, because there's so much discussion about Peter Mandelson, is what I'm going to call an unforced error in Keir Starmer's judgment, and how much culpability should he face for this, because that feels under-discussed, given we had a perfectly good pro-Trump or, ingratiated with Trump ambassador operating in the US in Karen Pierce, who wanted to stay on, and yet Starmer, as the minister who decides this, insisted on replacing her with Peter Mandelson, who was, without all details, still controversial, still laden with the potential for compromising things have been mentioned. What's Starmer's sanction going to be for this?
Laura?
I think the caller is right that there are questions around why was Peter Mandelson chose to replace Karen Price, who was
Pierce.
Karen Pierce. For all intents and purposes, she was she'd made big inroads with the Trump administration. She was called the Trump whisperer, and it's quite unusual to have a politician these days being appointed ambassador rather than a career ambassador.
Lincoln?
I think Rob's absolutely correct, and there are big questions about. I think Stephen, our first caller, said, "Is this him done, dead?" Well, that all depends on whether Labour ever want to rehabilitate him. It's not really up to the rest of us. The rest of us will all oppose it. But they have rehabilitated him time and time again. And on this occasion, the Prime Minister's judgment has got to be brought into question. The line that was taken by the government today was, well, what are you going to do if someone lies on their, declaration of interests? There's got to be somewhere in between that where human judgment also comes into play.
Catherine?
I'm sorry, but the line for me was drawn at the association with Epstein after he was convicted of his crimes. That was my line. So I think there are legitimate questions to ask that need to be answered.
But do you think there was enough due diligence done at the time of his appointment, either by the security services, the Prime Minister, whoever? Because it's all very well looking at these things with hindsight, but in hindsight, it was a catastrophic error.
Well, I would agree with that. In hindsight, it was without doubt a catastrophic error. And I think those questions need to be answered.
And you were in government at the time he was appointed. Did you have any qualms about that at the time?
I wasn't aware. I have to say, I don't know about everybody else. And my apologies if I was not paying enough attention. But the first I was aware of the association post Epstein's conviction was when that came out in the press. Now, everybody afterwards, including journalists, all said, well, we knew, we were aware, but I wasn't. That was the first I was aware of it. And I was horrified by that.
Simon?
Well, Starmer might say the same, I think. I don't know what we're supposed to say. Shall we hang him? Do we want to shoot him? Do we want to put him in prison? There's no attempt to grade our sense of scandal at the moment in politics. Every day we need a new scandal. Every day we want a public inquiry into it.
But this is a genuine scandal.
I'm not arguing about that.
He's not going to get a £50 fixed penalty notice for this. And we had a Prime Minister who lost his job because of that.
I thought how he behaved was reprehensible until now, when how he behaved emerges as being outrageous. No question about that. And I think he should be punished. I'm sure he will be punished. All this can be dealt with. The theory that this is the most important story of the week, which is the way it's been presented on the BBC and all other channels.
It's only Monday.
All right.
So I'm going back. Came out today.
No ramifications for Starmer.
All over the weekend. It has ramifications for everybody. All scandals have ramifications. Do we not know how to judge them? Can we not put anything into any sort of balance?
You're almost giving the impression of saying, "Well, move along, nothing to see here."
I'm not saying that. We've got to go back and deal with these things, and we do it now obsessively with public inquiries, which I'm totally against. They're a waste of time.
Can I just gently say that
you don't have to be gentle. You can take it.
That's what was done back when the revelations, when he was made ambassador, and at that time, nobody was reporting that he still had that association with Epstein after his convictions. That only came out much later when the papers came out. But that was apparently widespread public knowledge. But it was move on.
Well,
and it's only got worse.
I do hope the two MPs here will spend some time worrying about what's happening to the country, not gloating over someone's misfortune.
I spent this afternoon in a public accounts committee hearing talking about environmental regulation and improving the pollution situation of our water companies and everything else. That's what I do all day in my day job.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it.
And, it just so happens that we're on Cross Questions and this is the story of the day.
Okay.
Well, Lincoln was having a nice smoke in the smoking room, weren't you, Lincoln?
I have been nailed to that chamber for 4.5 hours today. Ian, happy birthday. Yeah.
Yes, we should mention it. It's Lincoln's birthday today. Well, should we do, instead of the fun question at the end, no, Chris knows what I'm going to say, maybe we'll do a rendition of Happy Birthday. No, that's being vetoed by my colleagues.
It might sound like a Lib Dem conference.
Right, we'll move
Where's
on.
that
It's
Polanski when you need him?
8:20.
This is LBC.
Idle.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
21 minutes past 8 on LBC. Let me reintroduce you to my panel. Sir Simon Jenkins, columnist for The Guardian. Laura Beveridge, political correspondent for Politics Joe. Are you new to that job? Because wasn't that Ava Santino? Is she still with you?
Ava Santino is my editor now.
Is she your boss?
Her old job.
I remember her when she was James O'Brien's producer here.
She's formidable.
How she's progressed, eh? Catherine McKinnell is Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North and Lincoln Job. It's Conservative MP for Spelthorne. Right. I mean, let's go to another subject that some people might say we spend too much on, Brexit. Nikki is in Kent and says, 6 years on, Brexit's so-called liberation has delivered few promises and many costs, economic friction, diminished influence and squandered opportunities. The departure passed not with pride but with quiet resignation. Is this a telling verdict in itself, or did you celebrate and put out the bunting? I suppose that is referring to the anniversary of Brexit Day, which was the 31st of January. Was it 2020? So it was on Saturday, rather than the 2016 date, which, of course, we're nearly 10 years on from that. Lincoln Job.
I don't think we have yet seen the potential for Brexit and the benefits that it can bring. And the reason why I think that is because we had been in the European Union for a very long time. And I'm sure, though, that over that time, lots of ministers have been, lying in the bath, having great ideas, and they come into work and they say, I'd like to do this with the country. And their civil servants have said, yeah, great idea, Minister, but you can't do that. And if you look at all of our institutions,
they say that anyway, don't they? As Catherine probably has the scars on her back to.
No, Catherine was genuinely one of the best ministers in the government, and so I think it's an absolute travesty that the government couldn't see that and moved her on. But anyway, so you've got all these institutions who have grown up in the era of the EU, and it has promoted people, it has developed cultures, and it's going to take a proper effort to change our cultural approach, to understand, firstly, where we might seek the benefits of being a sovereign nation again, and then actually realising it.
But we are 6 years on. I mean, OK, we've had COVID in the middle, and I think that did play a big role in it. Dominated everything that government was doing. And so maybe they didn't take advantage of the freedoms in inverted commas that you're talking about.
Yeah, I genuinely don't think we've given it a proper try yet. And I think that we've got to do that, because that's what the will of the majority of the country was, albeit a narrow majority. And it's we've got to do better at realising the benefits of being a sovereign nation again.
Laura?
I'd like if the people who had pushed for Brexit so much had thought of this before we actually went to a referendum, because as a young person, I wasn't actually old enough to vote in the Brexit referendum, but the decisions of that referendum have shaped my life. I mean, just purely in an economic sense, it's about 4% loss to GDP. And Debatable, but I just look in terms of job applications. When me and my friends were applying for jobs, a lot of these applications said you need to have the right to work in the EU. And given how great the graduate market is in the UK, I think a lot of them would have liked the opportunity to work in the EU. Things like Erasmus were no longer an opportunity to us. And I think that just saying to those people that they need to keep waiting and eventually they'll see the Brexit benefits, I just don't think it's a good enough answer anymore.
Catherine?
So, obviously, I don't think Lincoln was in Parliament when we went through all of these debates, and you're fortunate because it was a very circular debate around the type of things that Lincoln's saying. You will see, trust us, you will see, and we will take you to this new promised land. And obviously, things have been really tough for various reasons since Brexit. We've had the impact of Brexit, but also and the fundamental change that brought, and then we've obviously had Ukraine, we had a pandemic. There have been a lot of challenges the country has faced, and we have not been on solid ground to meet them because I think the change had been so seismic. So I understand the sentiment of wait and you will see, but it's not good enough for the British public. So I think we do need to work hard, and I know that's what the government is focused on, is creating a stronger country with the situation that we have. So developing much stronger relations, working much closer on defence, on national security. But there's so much we still need to do on food standards. I said I spent this afternoon with the DEFRA and the Environment Agency, music touring, youth employment and the ability to, move around Europe and work and have those opportunities. So I think there's a lot of work to do. There are a lot of opportunities, but obviously it's a lot of work, and we're starting, I feel, from behind because of the nature of the agreement that we reached and the way that Brexit was delivered by the previous government.
Simon?
I agree with the last remark. I was a Eurosceptic, quite a deep Eurosceptic, way back. And I always thought we probably shouldn't have joined the EU, that EFTA was a good enough place to be, but that we needed trade relations with Europe in which we could trade freely with Europe. It absolutely made sense. Before the referendum, I was writing about it an awful lot, and I kept changing my mind deliberately to try and persuade myself that one point of view was the right one.
I think Boris Johnson went through a similar process.
He did indeed. It was more disastrous in his case than mine. But after it, I came to the conclusion that I was not unduly worried about leaving the EU. It was a disaster to go for hard Brexit. Absolute disaster. And there's no doubt that Theresa May thought that as well. I mean, I talked to her about it. It was available to us, and the Europeans negotiating the deal thought we'd be negotiating a softer Brexit than we did. As it is, I don't know anybody who thinks it's been a good idea. I mean, everyone I have any association with who deals with Europe says it's been either a disaster or it's been a mess. Friends of mine who are pro-Brexit, maybe Lincoln, maybe not, I always say to them, why don't you be the first person who comes clean and say it was a mistake? Either way, we will, I'm absolutely sure, sooner or later, under some sane government, and I think Starmer's moving in the right direction, establish a new relationship with Europe. The Norway route, so to speak, or the EFTA route, the customs union route, one of these routes brings us back into a relationship with our nearest neighbours on the continent, our biggest trading partners, where we don't have the craziness we now have at Dover. I mean, it's mad at the moment.
I mean, I was listening to Keir Starmer doing an on-stage thing with Matt Ford on his podcast last week, and Keir Starmer made the very good point that if we went back into the customs union, anybody who advocates that has to explain to the workers of Jaguar Land Rover that thousands of them would lose their jobs because the deal that we've got with America would fall by the wayside. The longer we remain outside the EU, considerations like that are going to come to the fore, aren't they?
They will. I mean, there are so many mistakes that have been made since we left. The whole new list of people are going to be complaining about it. But overall, we have not done well as a result of it. It has cost a lot of money, and it's caused immense inconvenience and disturbance to many trade relationships. And I do think that sooner or later, the EFTA route means that you'll be ad hoc negotiating things like Jaguar. You'll be ad hoc negotiating things like fish and North Sea and so on. It's a feasible route to go down. And I think that's the way that a government will certainly go down. I have no doubt about it. I'll take money on it.
OK, well, I'm sure Prime Minister Farage, if that happens, will take note of that. Right, we will move on to other subjects for the last half an hour of the programme, including our fun question at the end. I know you all look forward to that. It's 8:30 on LBC. Time for the news headlines with Darryl Jackson.
The Metropolitan Police has confirmed it's reviewing reports Peter Mandelson committed misconduct in a public office following the release of more Epstein files in the US. Emails indicate he could have passed on sensitive information to the disgraced financier while he was the business secretary in 2009. Lord Mandelson has previously denied wrongdoing. It's understood MP Dan Norris has been further arrested on suspicion of sexual offences, which he vehemently denies. He's been suspended from Labour since his original arrest last April. And resident doctors in England have voted overwhelmingly in favour of a mandate for a further 6 months of industrial action. Members of the BMA have already carried out 14 strikes, which have resulted in the cancellation of thousands of appointments. LBC weather: rain will spread into the southwestern parts of England and Wales tonight. Rain continuing in the northeast, a low of 0.
LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:33 on LBC. On Cross Question tonight, we have Sir Simon Jenkins, columnist for The Guardian, Laura Beveridge, political correspondent for Politics Joe, Lincoln Job, Conservative MP for Spelthorne, and Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North. And as Lincoln very ungallantly mentioned, Catherine, you were school education minister, weren't you? And
yeah.
You were, how can I put this kindly, let go Was that a bit of a shock?
Yes, it did come as a shock. I was in the middle of quite a lot of things, some of which still materialise, the curriculum and assessment review. But obviously one of the big areas that I was working on was special educational needs and disabilities, and that's all to come in the white paper.
So I must admit, that just as you asked about Peter Mandelson, when I saw that you were no longer in the government, I thought, well, of all the people, all the useless people they still got in the government, and they got rid of you.
You tempt me down a road with flattery, but I mean, I have to be really honest. I've never been given a reason. Your guess is as good as mine.
So, did the Prime Minister phone you, or was it the Chief Whip? They don't actually tell you why they're.
Yeah, no reason, and no, I have not spoken to the Prime Minister.
Says it all. Right, let's move on to another text question from Christoph in Turners Hill in West Sussex. Do you agree that Trump deserves his FIFA Peace Prize? And should he be up for the Nobel one, which he claims Norway robbed him of next year? Now, the background to this, in case you're thinking you're living on Groundhog Day, the FIFA president Gianni Infantino has said today that objectively Trump deserves FIFA's newly created Peace Prize. This comes as the Iranian regime has suggested it is now ready for talks about its nuclear enrichment programme following Trump's threats to launch more strikes. Catherine, let's start with you.
Gosh, so the question is?
The question is, do you agree that he deserves his FIFA Peace Prize?
Well, so I'm not entirely sure what the FIFA Peace Prize is. It's not.
Join the club.
It's not quite the Nobel Peace Prize. So whether he deserves it or not, I think, is to be determined in terms of the future of the FIFA Peace Prize. I mean, it hasn't gone unnoticed that after receiving it, he did go on to create quite a situation with NATO allies over Greenland, which was resolved, which I think was a great relief to everybody. I think some of it really comes down to Ukraine and what happens there, because obviously we are all very concerned for Ukraine. We stand in solidarity with them, and we want to make sure that there is a collective effort amongst NATO allies to bring peace to Ukraine. And so I think it's all to be shown.
But if he did pull off a deal with Iran about the nuclear enrichment programme and somehow maybe persuaded them that they should restrain themselves from interfering in other countries, i.e. by funding Hamas and Hezbollah, etc., I mean, that would be quite a powerful case for him to get it next year, wouldn't it?
You know, President Trump is the elected president of the United States, a really important ally, a really important player within the international community. Anything that he can bring to bear on bringing forward peace in our world is clearly welcome. So he needs to, use his immense influence to bring that peace. But obviously, it's up to him how he chooses to use that influence that he has.
Lincoln.
The most important thing FIFA can do is have decent ticket prices for the World Cup. They should be concentrating on that.
I think that ship has sailed.
They should be concentrating on that rather than sucking up to the President of the United States. The situation in Iran is complex, and we simply don't know what the strategy is that the Americans are pursuing. And it's very easy to sort of fire off stray volts of commentary and chat, not really understanding what it is they're doing. I mean, the fact that we can't have a nuclear-armed Iran, tick, agree. The fact that Iran has been sponsoring terrorism around the Middle East, which has destabilized that region, and it's another jolly good reason to get after them, tick. The most appalling scenes from all over Iran of civilians being murdered by the regime, tick. They're a bad regime, and we've got to do something about them. Interestingly, the Prime Minister's instincts on this are not great. Over that weekend when they did bomb, on the Friday, the Prime Minister was saying we should de-escalate. And over the weekend, the Americans went in and took out, to a greater or lesser extent, we're not entirely sure what, the nuclear facilities. So if we need to see the nuclear program dismantled in Tehran, and we need to see it with our own eyes or indeed some inspectors' eyes, because at the moment there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And we also need to understand better exactly what it is he's attempting to achieve. In terms of would I have given anything to President Trump when he made those disobliging comments about me and my men in Afghanistan not being on the front line, you would have to peel me off the roof that day. I was making a speech in the House of Commons about a man in Northern Ireland, a man in Afghanistan, a company commander, Sean Burchill, incredibly brave, and he was killed. And he was killed on the front line, if you can talk about such a thing, in the Helmand River Valley. And so he's on a regain with me.
Simon.
I think we are yet to know what's wrong with Donald Trump. He is clearly suffering from what's called narcissistic personality disorder. And I looked it up on Google, what it is as a condition. It is an exact description of Donald Trump. Everything he does is designed with a consequence that will react to his advantage. It almost doesn't matter what it is. He'll seize at the headline. He'll then act it through and see if at the end of it he's come out on top or not. Now, if as a side effect of that, a huge range of peace treaties are signed around the world, which I think is not likely, but is not inconceivable, I will, so to speak, thank goodness that it's happened. I won't necessarily thank Trump, because that wasn't his intention was to do good for Trump. I have to say at the same time, in the case of Iran, I mean, the one time I cheered Trump was last year when he spoke in Saudi Arabia. The days when I'm going to go around the world America's going to go around the world policing every country and telling it how it should be governed are over. We're going to worry about America now and no one else. Rubbish. Ever since then, he's done the opposite. But only if you know what he's suffering from will you understand why he's doing the opposite. As far as I'm concerned, I really don't care about Iran. It's not my country. They're not threatening me. They're not doing anything that affects my life at all. If they want to make a complete mess of their country, that's their business, not my business. And as soon as we start, I'm afraid talking as Lincoln does, but what we must do something about, it leads us down to the mess that we so often made about our international interventions. I'm a non-interventionist passionately. I'd rather worry about Britain's relations with the countries around it, what's going on with the British economy. These things are matters that affect us, me, in this country. The rest of the world we gave up when we gave up the empire. We do not go around trying to be a sort of poor man's America, sorting out everyone's ills. It's a mistake.
Simon, I think I'm right in saying that you didn't think that we should support Ukraine when they were being invaded by Russia. Is that right?
I said, in that case, we should support Ukraine because as an act of charity, they've been outrageously treated and we should help them. But they're not members of NATO. Russia wasn't threatening me. I can't treat every single country as a threat to me. And the basis on which the defence debate at the moment is being conducted, it's as if Britain is under threat from Russia. Britain's never been under threat from Russia. We're not under threat from Russia.
Britain has never been under threat from Russia.
Never. It's never been under. If you give me a shred of evidence, I'll change my mind. Possibly in the 17th century. But I mean, this business that everyone's threatening us, I want to know what threats mean. To go back to where we started this whole program, I want to know the balance of what we're discussing here. What is the nature of the threat? They're doing all kinds of silly things like the Chinese are doing. It doesn't necessarily mean we've got to arm ourselves with tanks to fend off this threat. It's a matter of getting these things into some sense of order and proportion, and we're very bad at doing that.
So the Finns and the Estonians are petrified that the ceasefire will take place in Ukraine because they think that 850,000 battle-hardened Soviet Russian soldiers will simply redeploy to that part of the region. Presumably you say, well, that's Finland and Estonia. I'm not really bothered about them. And so until it gets to sort of, Dover, you shouldn't really be concerned.
I thought we had a defence, not an attack. I mean, we're defended against attack. We're not defending other countries against their attack. I'm desperately sorry for them. I'll probably under NATO, I've got to help them. So I'm committed to that. I'm not terribly in favour of NATO anymore, I have to say. It's a different debate.
Well, you and Mr. Trump both.
But Mr. Trump was right on some things, accidentally. But the basis on which we have defence spending at the moment is not what is threatening Britain. It's what is threatening Poland, what's threatening Estonia, what's threatening Ukraine. The conversation has drifted from defence into a sort of attack. We've had 7 wars this century.
Not one of them. Most of them.
Not one of them was in defence of Britain.
Well, you could argue the Ukraine war is, by supporting Ukraine, we are supporting our own national security. I mean, you say that Putin has no threat to the UK. Well, didn't he say that we would be the first on his agenda if he was ever to sort of fire a nuclear weapon?
Well, you've got to decide.
What about Salisbury? Was that no threat to this country's national security?
It's not a threat.
Well, using chemical weapons on British soil was not a threat.
It's a scandal. It's an outrage. It's a crime.
But it was an attack on Britain.
But it was an attack, yes, an attack.
Authorised by Putin himself.
Do we need 500 tanks to defend ourselves against that sort of threat? We've got to keep it in proportion. Otherwise, you just go completely crazy.
OK. Let me read out this text we've had from David in Brighton. Best cross-question panel ever. I would vote for all of them, even the 2 that aren't politicians. They each possess a tempered serenity that is inspiring.
Thank you, David.
Well, there you
from
go.
Brighton.
You please some of the people some of the time, so that's good. It's 8:45.
This is LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:47. So Simon Jenkins, Laura Beveridge, Catherine McKinnell and Lincoln Jopp with me answering your questions. Carl is in Cambridge. Hello, Carl.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I served in the Royal Air Force in the 1980s, and since then, here we are in 2026, we're in the situation where you can put the British Armed Forces, so you can put the Army in Twickenham and have seats left over. The Royal Air Force has been reduced approximately by about 2/3. The Navy has a handful of ships. When will we start to take our defence more seriously? You know, the Labour government have got obviously a paper that keeps being pushed back, and it just seems that our own defence, our own military is just being ignored. And why?
Now, the British Army contains just under 74,000 regular full-time personnel. And for those who aren't aware, Twickenham Stadium seats 82,000 people. Lincoln, as a former British Army officer.
Thank you, Iain. And Carl, thank you for your service. Really does you huge credit, and thank you very much indeed. I think certainly the way in which the government are currently trying to do our forces, they've just extended the age at which I personally can be mobilised up to the age of 65.
90.
And if the Secretary of State for Defence could hear my knees that sound like crisp packets when I go up and downstairs, he might want to rethink that as a strategy. I do think there's a much more serious point, and it is this, that we're not, despite what Simon said in the answer to the last question, we're not good at, to a certain extent, scaring the bejesus out of our public. Everyone has been very happy to have, since the mid-90s onwards, governments of both colours to hollow out defence. And they've done so because they've wanted to spend money on other things, take a peace dividend. And the fact is that, the Russians chose guns, we chose butter. And we need to have an honest conversation with the nation and say that the threat is increasing. It is an increasingly dangerous world, and we're going to have to make some incredibly difficult decisions as to whether we want guns, not butter. And the government, I think, have got to be a lot more positive when it comes to releasing secret information, as they did when they released the fact that submarine surfaced by the Russian spy boat. That was a really good thing to do because it gave people a glimpse into exactly what is going on. And we should be doing more of that because the threat perception is, the reaction to it is greater balance of investment in defence.
Simon.
Well, I said my piece beforehand. I appreciate where Lincoln's coming from, and my respect for people in the armed forces is total. And I think it's important, and we ought to back defence thoroughly. My only plea is let's answer the question: what do you mean by defence? I felt that my defence, frankly, starts in the Channel. It starts round Britain. I'm not honestly worried about other countries. When Boris Johnson sent an aircraft carrier to the South China Sea, I thought to myself, this is us gone completely mad. And to pretend that China represents a military threat to the existence of Britain is absurd. However, we have got to defend our shores. And that means we need submarines, we need surface ships around Britain. We need to worry about what the Russians are doing to us in all sorts of other respects, which affect our trade, affect our security. All these things matter, and they all require a defence appropriate to the threat. The threat is not existential to Britain. It's never been since I've been alive, and I've read books about this. I'm worried about it if it was true. I'm not left-wing or anything, but I just feel constantly we're being conned into spending vast sums of money on the wrong sort of defence.
Well, tell you what, have you listened to the War Game podcast that Sky News did? Listen to that, and it will frighten you to death.
Yeah, it's good.
Laura?
It's probably designed to do that.
Well,
if I was in the defence business, I'd do that.
Well, Laura.
I think since the end of the Cold War, essentially since we've entered this age of the hegemonic US, the UK has outsourced all of its defence, but not just its defence, practically its whole economy to the United States, and has been operating as some sort of a vassal state. And I think that's why we were in the South China Seas, not because it was in our interest to be there, but because it was in the American interest to be there. And I think since we have had this rhetoric from Donald Trump now on Greenland, the UK has suddenly realised that actually maybe we can't rely on the alliances of old anymore. Maybe it's not in our interest to be a vassal state of the US, and alliances are shifting. Maybe that means a move closer to Europe again. Maybe it means a move closer to China, and we did just see Keir Starmer over in China, and we've seen our European allies and Mark Carney in Canada seeking closer relationships and trade with China. And meanwhile,
So you prefer a relationship with China rather than the American biggest democracy in the world?
I wouldn't prefer either, frankly. I think the United Kingdom should be run in the interests of the British people, but in a world of strategic and shifting alliances, I think Keir Starmer feels like the old settlement is disintegrating, and in front of him he has choices which are to either align more with Europe, China, or build up our own defence capabilities.
Catherine?
So, in answer to Carl, I also thank him for his service, but would also, in terms of the numbers that he's using, not leave out our incredible reserves, which we have in great numbers, and who also do a fantastic job. And as you know, our Defence Minister Al Carnes is a reservist himself, and I think he'll be going at 90, Lincoln, just to say, from what he demonstrates. But I absolutely agree with the diagnosis of the challenge, which is our armed forces are at their lowest in 200 years. And that is a situation that, as a government, we've inherited. I'm not going to get into ding-dong about that, but the former Secretary of State, Ben Wallace himself, has recognised that we haven't done enough. So I think we do need to invest in defence, and I think that will be good for Britain and good for our security. And we have committed to the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, £270 billion this Parliament. And I think we need to make sure that is delivered and keep doing more.
Right. Next question from Vaz in Warwick. Speaking of other scandals, as Simon wanted us to, has the student loan scandal gone away? And has the Chancellor written off an entire generation of potential Labour voters with her comments to LBC last week? Now, Rachel Reeves told LBC's political editor Natasha Clark that the student loan system and its high interest rates is fair, a claim then supported here on LBC yesterday by the Housing Secretary, Steve Reed. Very brief on this, if we can, sort of 45 seconds each. Catherine, let's start with you.
I really struggle with this because I feel very fortunate to have had student loans, but were paid back without significant interest. That was the situation in my day, and I recognise how challenging and how disheartening it must be for students to be working hard and paying and seeing that bill just keep going up. So whether or not however you describe it, whatever you say it is, and however on paper it might look fair in terms of paying back what you have gained, I think psychologically it is incredibly challenging for young people to start out in their adult life on that basis.
You, as a former education minister, admit the system is unfair.
I think it doesn't feel fair. Well, it doesn't feel fair for the people that keep seeing the bill racking up. And I appreciate all the arguments about it will get written off. I think the fundamental challenge with it is if you come from a wealthy family, you don't need to pay that interest. You won't pay that interest. But if you come from a family that can't afford to support you through your degree, you will pay a significant amount more for your education. So the principle of contribution, I agree with. I think there is potentially an unfairness in who is paying the greatest amount.
Laura.
It's not a loan, it's a tax, and it's a tax on a generation that we're told that if they go to university, if they're good citizens, if they do as Tony Blair is encouraging them to do, that they'll be rewarded with good jobs. And
you have been.
I didn't have a student loan because I went to university in Scotland where there is no tuition fees.
But you still have to have a loan to exist, don't you?
Yeah, I had a maintenance grant, but it's quite low and the repayments are very, very low and it will be paid off.
Okay, Lincoln?
Declaring interest, I've got children who are 30, 28 and 21. And so I've been through this or am going through it. It was raised on the doorstep with me on Saturday morning by a parent who actually said, in retrospect, I wish they hadn't gone to university because I can never see us paying off this loan. I personally would use student loan forgiveness to direct people into career streams which the nation needs. So the GI Bill in America did this. When they wanted people to re-enlist, they paid for their education because they wanted people in the military. And I think you can do that with our pinch point trades, people where we want to go in.
Simon, very briefly, if you can.
I would do away with student loans. I would have a surcharge on your income tax if you've been to university.
Very brief, thank you. Right, Rico in Kingsbury says, loads of singers, etc., who I've never heard of, showed they have Trump derangement syndrome again last night. Why do celebrities think we care what they think about the real world? Now, last night's Grammy Awards saw lots of performers criticise the ICE agency for its actions in Minnesota, while Trump has also threatened to sue comedian Trevor Noah for a joke he made involving Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think there was any protest about what's going on in Iran at the Grammys. How weird is that? Right, again, very briefly from you all. Laura, let's start with you.
Well, the Grammys were held in the US, so I assume that's why the death of two US citizens on American soil is on the minds of the people in attendance. But fans actually do want to know the politics of the celebrities they support. So I would disagree with the person who texted in and also with Ricky Gervais, who made similar comments during the Grammys. And fans are voting with their wallets. They're voting by not streaming or streaming certain artists.
Lincoln?
Well, firstly, the Grammys were a huge success for the Brits yesterday. And I think we should recognise that first. Do I really care what the winner of a Brit, thinks about the political situation? Well, they're as entitled to a view as anyone else. But I do think celebrities have to be very careful about how they use their platform.
Simon.
Well, if you're telling anybody, by the way, you're going to have 30 seconds of international fame in front of a microphone, say anything you like, it's difficult to resist.
I have 3 hours of it every night.
So I agree with Lincoln, but I have to say that last night Olivia Dean not only obviously sang beautifully, but I thought the way she presented a view of her life and her experience of immigration and the impact that it had on her life, I thought she did with real class. She made a political statement, but without it being too in your face. I thought she did it with real class.
I do agree.
Right. Mike has our fun question. As it's football transfer deadline day, who else in politics, apart from Peter Mandelson, is worthy of a free transfer out of the public eye? Laura.
I think on the theme of Lords, I'd go with Michelle Mone.
Lincoln?
Well, firstly, I think it's very brave of you to bring up football for the second time, given what happened at Stamford Bridge with West Ham.
Well, the first half was rather good.
Genuinely, it's the first time I've nearly left after a half. Fortunately, I stayed and saw a very famous victory. It's not a person, it's a phrase, and I would free transfer the phrase 14 years because the public...
You'd rather forget them.
Because the public are genuinely getting bored of the government that being their constant refrain. The government have been in power now for, 18 months, and I want to see them take responsibility for what they are doing to the country.
Simon.
Ed Miliband.
That's a bit cruel.
He wants to cover the countryside with solar panels and wind turbines, and it's my idea of hell. It's unnecessary. It's entirely to enable him to go to an international conference and say he's meeting a zero-sum game or something, and it's appalling.
Catherine.
So after seeing a horrifying clip of him singing at a Lib Dem conference a few years ago, I think Zach Polanski.
Well, it's Simon's new hero, because he's against NATO.
Watch the clip and you'll feel differently.
Right, thank you all very much indeed. Great panel this evening. Now, tomorrow we have three MPs on the panel. Sarah Pochin from Reform UK, Gordon McKee from Labour, and Josh Babarinder from the Lib Dems, plus the Financial Times journalist Lucy Fisher. Coming up in the next hour, and I think this is either going to be one of those phone-ins that really takes off and everyone thinks, oh, this is an interesting one, or nobody's going to phone in. Anyway, let's see. Have you had to break things off with a partner or a friend for this reason? This reason is, if your partner or a close friend earns much more or much less than you do, how do you navigate any awkwardness which this causes? Money is at the root of all evil. Is it at the root of financial breakups as well? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call, because a fifth of Britons would consider ending a relationship or even a friendship because they earn either more or less than the other person.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Met Police says it's received a number of reports of alleged misconduct in a public office after more claims about Lord Mandelson's links to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The force says it will review the information and consider whether there should be any criminal investigation. Lord Mandelson's quit the Labour Party but denies wrongdoing. Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne North, told LBC she's appalled.
The focus on Peter Mandelson as an individual, the thing that makes me most angry is that it's taking away the focus on these girls and these women that have suffered so much. And I cannot accept it. And I just want the public to know that it is not normal, it is not acceptable, and it is not how politicians behave. It's not how the vast majority of public serving of all parties, politicians behave.
The serial killer Steve Wright has admitted to murdering a 17-year-old girl in 1999. Victoria Hall disappeared on a night out in Felixstowe. Wright is already behind bars for 5 murders. Professor of Criminology David Wilson says detectives must now look at other unsolved cases in the area.
Is the opportunity that this must now give to the Norfolk and Suffolk Constabulary to look at other unsolved murders of young women around the time that Wright was active.
Independent MP Dan Norris says he vigorously and entirely denies allegations of rape, sexual assault, voyeurism and upskirting after he was further arrested by police. The latest allegations date between the 2000s and 2020s. He was suspended by Labour last year. The Rafah crossing has reopened in both directions. The Foreign Secretary is welcoming the limited opening between Gaza and Egypt. Only a few people can pass through, not aid trucks. And resident doctors in England have voted to renew their mandate for industrial action for another 6 months. Jack Fletcher from the BMA says it's not just about pay.
There will still be around 10,000 doctors, even who are prioritised, turned away from training places, and that's because of totally inadequate and reckless workforce decisions that have been made over the last few years. We need more jobs.
The government says it's continuing to work with the BMA. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 51 points at 10,275. The pound buys $1.37 and €1.16. LBC weather: rain will spread into southwestern England and Wales tonight. Rain continuing in the northeast, a low of 0. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, it's 5 minutes past 9 on LBC. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us. Now, 1 in 5 Britons have ended or would consider ending a romantic or platonic relationship because of salary differences, and this is according to a survey for Nationwide. More than 1 in 6 Britons, 17%, say they feel uncomfortable talking about money, with 19% saying they've experienced clashing attitudes towards spending and saving, and 18% have felt the pressure of a partner relying on them financially. Now, half of people believe that money is too private to discuss, and 23% avoid such conversations out of fear of judgment and criticism. More than 1 in 10 say they worry conversations about money could result in conflict. Now, in order to cope with financial tensions and avoid conversations, 10% say they have had to cancel plans or delay major money decisions, and 7% say they've lied about their income. I mean, if you're married, surely you can't lie about your income, can you? Why would you want to do that? Some 42% say they've faced negative consequences after raising an issue around money, including stress and anxiety, feelings of resentment, or a change in their relationship's power dynamic. However, 33% said that openly discussing their finances had strengthened their relationship. Well, I suppose one of the issues here is if one, say you get married and you're both earning roughly the same amount of money, and then one of you, whether it's a husband or wife is immaterial here, one of you starts earning double the amount of the other. Has that affected your relationship if that's happened to you? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Let's talk to Camlin Kaur, who is a psychotherapist. Hello, Camlin.
Good evening, Iain.
Is this a real problem?
Yes, it absolutely is. And the reason why it's a real problem is because money is never just about numbers. It's never about values. There's so much emotion attached to it. It represents people's security, their safety, their independence, their freedom, and in some cases, their identity and status as well. So any conversations around money, it feels very emotionally charged, which means it comes with a lot of stress, anxiety, fear of judgment, conflict, and all the other associated emotions that come with money.
But surely, if you marry someone, I mean, part of the marriage contract, I mean, unspoken, is that you share everything. So surely you would have to share everything about your finances, how much you earn and what assets you have.
Yeah, no, I agree. But at the same time, it's what you mentioned just there a few moments ago about sometimes situations change and there's a change in salary. So somebody might go off, work for a bit, and then that might affect the income coming in. And it could have started off where both parties were contributing equally or proportionally. But then as a result of a change in circumstances, that income is no longer coming in the way that it used to, which can then add a lot of friction, conflict, tension, and stress onto the other party.
See, I can well imagine that if you fall through whatever reason on hard times as a family, maybe the lead earner loses their job, then finances are going to be a cause of stress within the household. But what's your advice to people to cope with those sorts of circumstances?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to acknowledge that it is a source of stress and it is an issue, rather than pretending that everything's okay and silently swallowing back everything, including all emotions. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge it. The second thing is to have a conversation based on your values, like what does money represent to you? So don't get too caught up in the I feel like this and I want this and you do this and you make me feel like this. Talk about what money represents for you. Does it represent security? Does it represent independence? Does it represent freedom for you? Because then it kind of takes away that defensiveness in a conversation. Then, if you are going to have a conversation, have it when you both are in a calm state of mind. So don't bring up financial discussions during an argument or when you're already arguing about money. And be clear about what you're looking for. Are you wanting to let them know how you feel about the situation? Are you wanting the situation to change? Are you looking for them to contribute more or for you to contribute more? Like, what is the outcome of that conversation that you're wanting to get? And bear that in mind when you're having that conversation. And also, the final thing I would like to add there is, when you're having conversations about money, use I statements, because then it becomes about you rather than talking about you make me feel like this or because of you I am feeling like this.
If you have two, should we say, high earners who are in a relationship, is competition between them almost inevitable?
Not really, because I do know through my work, I come across a lot of power couples, and the competition doesn't always need to be there and the conflict doesn't always need to be there. So I think it depends on the dynamic you have as a couple and, again, your values and your attitudes towards money. And
I mean, financial situations, I suspect, are the major cause of conflict between two people in a relationship. What are the most common ways that they come about? Is it when one or other of them fall on hard times? Is there jealousy involved in financial management at all, in your experience?
Yeah, I think there's a number of issues, Iain, and this is what I see in my line of work. So first of all, it might be a couple's contributing equally to all the bills, but they're not actually earning the same salary bracket, or they're not in the same salary bracket. So there's a lot of people in couples that feel as though it should be proportionate. So it should be like a 60-40 split or a 30-50 split, 30-70 split. Can't do my maths there. 70 split. And the thing is, and what they find is that I'm earning proportionately less than my partner, so I don't see why I should be having to pay 50-50 and everything. So that's one thing. The second thing is that actual money represents a lot of insecurity for people as well. If they can't pay as much as they would like to, it makes them feel inadequate. There's a lot of shame attached to it as well. So sometimes that shame and inadequacy can lead to a lot of arguments as well.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Camilyn Call there, who's a psychotherapist. 0345 6060 973. Have you tried to break things off with a partner or a friend because you've fallen out over money in some way, whether it's jealousy, whether there's a sort of too much competition, or whatever reason? I'd like to hear from you. If your partner or a close friend earns much more or less than you do, how do you navigate any awkwardness which this causes? I can't say that I can bring a lot of personal anecdote to this question, really, because I've never fallen out with anyone because of money, or at least I like to think I haven't. 0345 6060 973. John is in Petersfield. Hello, John.
Hi, hello, good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call.
What would you like to tell us?
Well, I'd like to disagree with the previous lady because in my relationship, my wife earns the income. When my child was born, my 3.5-year-old, when he was born, I stopped working, and so in the evening, in the morning, I can look after him and give him his breakfast and read stories to him. And when he comes home at 3:30, I'm there reading stories, playing with him in the park, rather than being in an office until 5-6 o'clock. And I just like to say that in our relationship, there's no friction, there's no shame. It's just, we get to more time with our child.
Do you think that's a fairly modern thing, though? I mean, I don't know what your personal circumstances are, but I'm going to assume that you've got parents who, I mean, in their generation, would they have taken the same attitude?
No, I don't think they would have. No, I don't think my dad. I think my dad would have worked regardless.
And
I can see it.
Do you know many other people who are in the same situation as you, where you are the primary carer and your wife is the primary earner?
No, I don't know. I'm the only one that I know of at the moment, and in the past as well. It's the only one I can feel of. But again, I don't feel any shame because I get to spend time with my child. We both get to spend time with my child, and we're giving him the best of upbringings. We feel to get to, so he's with his dad and his mother at the same time.
And what would your advice be to others? Because, I mean, some men, I think, probably would feel a little bit emasculated in your position. You clearly don't, and I think that's entirely to your credit. But what advice would you give to maybe some of your friends?
I would say not to feel judged. I'm in a position where I don't really. I've got to the age of 43 now, so I've started not to care so much what other people think. I think that's probably the best way to go forward when you're thinking about this. Just don't care. It's not important at all, I don't think.
Well, I'm 20 years older than you, and I've come to that conclusion as well. I say what I want to say, and if people don't like it, well, frankly, they can do the other thing. And I think you've come to that conclusion much earlier than maybe I ever did. John, thank you very much indeed. 0345 6060 973. Have you found that finances have been the cause of a relationship breakdown? In a way, I'd like to think that it isn't a major cause of breakdown, but I suspect that money is at the root of a lot of evil. It's the root of a lot of relationships breaking down because, and I think particularly the primary earner in the household, whether it is male or female, I think if they then suddenly fall on a situation, maybe through no fault of their own, they kind of then have a guilty feeling. It may be unwarranted, but it's still there, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. It's 16 minutes past 9.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
They have fatal incompetence.
Straight to the point.
What is the problem they've got over there?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
The country's going backwards. Growth down. Energy prices up.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC. Come on! Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
9:17 on LBC. We're talking about whether money is the cause of relationship breakups. One of my colleagues here has just told me that his partner earns 3 times the amount that he does, and he doesn't feel emasculated by that at all. In fact, he seems to rather positively welcome it. Just shows how little he's paid here, doesn't it? Let's go to Sandy, who's in Chiswick. Hello, Sandy.
Hi, Ian. Good evening. What a great subject, covering some great ground. I just want to say your previous 2 callers brought a lot of humanity to the whole thing. I think it probably does engender that sort of thought. If it's any contribution to you, part of the problem, I think, is that we have an awful lot of status anxiety that is somewhat turbocharged by the getting and spending, as was said. So, in a sense, if we could possibly manufacture or generate ways to raise our children not to worry too much about their status, I think possibly we might make some real progress in that, and perhaps have less general anxiety about who is doing the breadwinning and who is doing the earning. I've been lucky enough to sort of navigate my way through most of my life without having to worry too much about what I did. I worked as a dancer all my life, in fact, so no money has ever been.
As a dancer?
As a professional dancer all my life, so of course I made absolutely no money, but have had the fortune to meet an awful lot of well-heeled people. And my general experience is it's what you bring. It's the non-material stuff that you can bring to relationships, whether you're married or whether they're just friends. It's a vexed question, though, and really a good one to cover. Well done.
I mean, there are people in this world who are obscenely motivated by money, whether it's, and I'm not making any distinction here between males and females. I mean, there are people of both sexes who are very motivated by money. And I suspect that those kind of people are much more competitive about salary levels than maybe you would be.
Yes, and perhaps the obscene word is good because, I mean, it's a strong word, and if applicable to somebody who is effectively somewhat over-motivated by the things, it's kind of incumbent upon them, particularly if they're well-resourced, to go and have a little look at themselves and perhaps discover what it is, what trauma in their childhood generated this, as you say, obscene motivation with materialism. It's a vexed question. But if you're locked in that relationship and somebody's giving you a hard time or making you feel ashamed, it's probably time to check out and move on, or get them to ask themselves some seriously hard questions. And as I say, perhaps if they're a little bit well-heeled than you, maybe they could afford to go and get some help.
Do you think you would be a little odd if you were in a relationship with somebody that was exceedingly rich or earned 10 times what you did?
It's funny. I don't know. I mean, I've been in relationships where somebody's been in a show and I've been out of work for 6 months. And you sit there and you think, do I get jealous or do I just pull my weight at this end? If you've got kids, obviously, you pull your weight and then the merry-go-round goes round and it's your turn to be in a job and somebody else's turn to stay at home in the evening. So I guess it's I've never really felt that I've experienced that. I have experienced people who are a great deal more wealthy than me, and occasionally I've been a great deal more wealthy than friends, but it's never impinged upon the way I see my relationships, and as far as I know, it's never impinged upon the way they've seen their relationship with me. That's the only thing I can kind of offer on that.
So tell me about the life of a male dancer.
Oh, it's wonderful. I shouldn't really say this. The life of a straight male dancer in the 1970s was pretty wonderful. We were a rarity, and I got married, had 4 children, all now dancers. God help us.
Really, all of them?
Yeah.
You're obviously very good at indoctrination.
Well, or enthusiasm. My wife and I like to think it was just that we were incredibly enthusiastic, and they went, "Oh, I'll have a slice of that, perhaps." And
at what age do you have to give it up?
I did a job last year. I'm 69. I'm in the middle of working on a piece with some collaborators at the moment, and I'm going to be 72 by the time we get that on anywhere. So I guess no time to give up. The time to give up is when you can no longer walk into a rehearsal studio, Ian. I'm planning on that anyway. When they actually have to carry me in, it's going to be a bit of an embarrassment.
Well, I mean, I only ask because I think it's genuinely interesting. I'm not sure that I've ever spoken to a male dancer on the phone before, so it's something that I think most of us couldn't. Well, let's put it this way:
There's a lot of us about. You
wouldn't want to see me dancing.
Oh, it's never too late for anybody.
What's the most famous production you've been in?
Oh, I was lucky enough to hit all the musicals at the beginning of the 80s, so I did the lot. Cats and Song and Dance and the lot. I was very, very lucky. Right place, right time. And it made a lot of difference if you were relatively tall and strong, because they always need somebody to lift people around.
Well, sounds fascinating, I must admit. Not a career I would have ever thought about for myself, which if you'd never seen me dance, you would understand why. Sandy, thank you very much. Jay says, you know what, Ian? I would never understand that I was born in 1973. I'm 53 years old. I've got friends whose wives earn 3 times what they earn, and it's not a problem, even though they run their own businesses. Their wives still earn more than they, and vice versa. I know women who don't earn any money at all because they've got 3 kids and look after the children, and their husband earns all the money and it's not a problem. I will never understand this. How do you put it? The idea that your wealth is what determines whether I've had girlfriends who are, I presume you mean skinned as opposed to skin, and I've had girlfriends who are wealthy, and money has never been an issue. I will never get my head around, if you love a person, if you really love a person, the vows, not vowels, the vows. This one's a challenging one to read out. The vows for better or worse. Remember that, the marriage vows for better or worse. For better or worse, he says. Jay, have you been drinking, honestly? Let's go to Simon, who is in San Jose in California. Simon, I can't imagine money is at the root of all evil in anything in the United States.
Well, the money itself isn't, and myself and my wife, we're pretty well off. But what we find is a lot of the emotion around security and whether we feel comfortable, whether my wife feels comfortable that we're going to be going to have enough income, after we retire, does actually cause a lot of stress. So, we have the money coming in, but we still end up with disagreements. Can we spend? Making sure that we're saving, and those types of things.
Do you think most people find a sort of balance in these things? I mean, if I think of my own situation, I've been with my partner for 30 years, and he owned a property, and through sort of wise buying and selling of houses, we're comparatively well off from that point of view. I didn't bring anything into the relationship because the property that I bought, I sold it for what I paid for it 10 years later. So I brought nothing into that. But then I can say, well, I bring in the money through what I do here. So there's always been a sort of understanding that it's there's a quid pro quo there.
I guess over time one gets that balance, but it's if you're worried about retirement, obviously here in the US, retirement can be quite expensive with medical bills and those types of things. Just that lack of confidence that you're going to be okay. It's not about who's bringing what in. It's about the sense of security and the nerves that brings into things.
Do you think people in America worry about money more than people here, or is it a case of health insurance means that if you don't have health insurance, inevitably you worry about money more than you do if you do?
Yeah, I do. I think perhaps here in the US there is a bigger concern about it because the private medical bills, that they're potentially very expensive. They're going to take a big amount, particularly these days, with a longer life expectancy. Trying to predict, do you need? You can easily start to work it, do calculations where you think, I need $1 million, I need $2 million, I need $3 million just for medical before you think about anything else. And so it can get quite scary here, even for those of us working in tech who bring in a good amount of income.
And I suppose also, I mean, there are some professions where, however well qualified you are, however long you've taken to qualify for that, you're never actually going to earn a huge amount of money, but people think that you are earning a huge amount of money. It's like lawyers. We all think of lawyers as earning shed loads of money. But if you are a criminal prosecutor or even a defence lawyer, you're not always on a lot of money, are you? And yet we all seem to think that anybody who's a lawyer is minted.
Yeah, I guess so. And I know for my wife, it's also just the thought, the concept that we might have to cut back on things is something she just doesn't want to think about at all. Which again puts more pressure on.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Lolly says, I've been married 17 years. I've never known how much my husband earns. And he has no idea about my finances. We have separate accounts and one joint account for bills, but all personal direct debits coming out of our individual accounts. You see, I think that's really weird. I don't know how prevalent that is, but you don't know how much your husband earns and he doesn't know about your finances. I just find that bizarre. I mean, if anybody wants to phone in and say, well, why should that be bizarre? We're all individual people. Yes, we may be married, but we're not joined at the hip. Why should my wife know exactly how much I earn, or why should I know how much she earns? I think that's just plain weird. Don't you? 0345 6060 973. And here's another one. This is from Helen, who's from Milton Keynes. Thank God I'm single. It's bad enough trying to justify my crazy spending habits to myself, let alone a partner. Well, that is a point of view, isn't it? Keep your calls coming. 0345 6060 973. Has money been at the root of problems in your own relationship? Why? What did you do about it? Or have you had a relationship breakdown or even a friendship breakdown because of money? 0345 6060 973. Let's get the latest LBC News headlines. It's 9:30 and here's Daryl Jackson.
The Metropolitan Police say they're reviewing a number of reports that Lord Peter Mandelson committed misconduct in a public office. He's alleged to have passed sensitive market information to Wall Street trader and paedophile Jeffrey Epstein while in government in 2009. He's previously denied any wrongdoing. Serial killer Steve Wright has admitted to murdering 17-year-old Victoria Hall in Suffolk more than 25 years ago. He's already serving a whole life term for the murders of 5 other women. And Palestinians are entering the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. The reopening's part of the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire and will see only 50 Palestinians crossing each day. LBC weather: rain will spread into southwestern England and Wales tonight. Rain continuing in the northeast, lows of 0.
This is LBC.
Donation
Dale on LBC.
9:33 on LBC. We're talking about finances and relationships and the pressures that can be brought on relationships by finances. And I haven't got any proof of this, but looking at this survey, it doesn't surprise me a lot of the figures that we found out from this nationwide survey. Now, they're saying that 1 in 5 Britons have ended or would consider ending a romantic or platonic relationship because of salary differences. So if one of you earns $70,000 a year and one of you earns $25,000 a year, that would be reason enough to consider ending a relationship. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Actually, because I don't imagine that there are many people out there who are in long-term relationships who earn exactly the same as their wife or husband. That would be odd, wouldn't it? I mean, should salary really be seen as a bit of competition? I don't think I would ever want to be in a relationship with anybody who felt that they were in competition with me because of what I earned, or that I was in competition with them because of what they earned. But then I have to think, if I was in a relationship with somebody who earned, I don't know, 3 or 4 times what I do, would that make me feel inferior in a way? Is there a bit of sort of masculine pride there? I don't know, because it's never happened. I'd like to think I wouldn't think like that, but can I sort of honestly say that it wouldn't cross my mind that I was a little bit inadequate? It's a difficult one, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. Now, more than 1 in 6 Britons, 17%, say they feel uncomfortable talking about money, with 19% saying they've experienced clashing attitudes towards spending and saving, and 18% have felt the pressure of a partner relying on them financially. Now, that last one, I'm not particularly surprised by. I'm surprised only 19% say that they've had clashing attitudes about spending and saving, because I think that is in many relationships. If you're living on the breadline and suddenly your partner comes home with a new phone or a new television, and you think, what the hell are you doing? We can barely afford to feed ourselves, and you go out and do that. I mean, that clearly is a cause for, friction within a relationship. And I understand that. But have you ever had that experience where you've had to sit your partner down and say, look, you can't be spending all of this money. We should be saving for a rainy day as well. Now, 12% say they worry conversations about money could result in conflict. And in order to cope with financial tensions and avoid conversations, 10% say they've had to cancel plans or delay major money decisions. 7% say they've lied about their income. I'm surprised that's only 7%, to be honest. The thing is, though, if you lie about your income, it never does you any good in the long term, does it? Because eventually, I mean, if you're saying that your income is double what it really is, well, the other person is not stupid. I mean, eventually they're going to work out that what you're sort of spending in the family budget doesn't meet what you say your income is. Simon's in Tottenham. Hello, Simon.
Good evening to you and your listeners.
Hi.
Iain, it's an interesting conversation, as I was saying to your researcher. I got married, 1991, 31st of August, down here in Tottenham. And I never, ever once asked my dear lady, that gave me 2 lovely grown-up daughters. She worked for the government, Crown Prosecution Service. She used to be MOD. I never asked her what she earned. We never discussed it. The only time we discussed it, for you and your listeners, was when we had our first child, Rihanna. Obviously, she had to go on part-time maternity with the government scheme and that. So her hours were reduced, which had an impact on financial income. So what I did, Iain, as a street man I am from London, I went from day driving to night trunking, because that then you get an increment from sociable working hours. So I used to go from Enfield up to Perrybar, Birmingham, every night. sometimes with a police escort. Never knew what I was pulling on the Arctic. And that increased, that picked up the shortfall, and we got through it, but I still never knew what she earned. What we did for your listeners, we worked it out the best way as Jamaican people. I took care of the mortgage and the house insurance, and our dear beloved Dawn, even though we separated because I went back to Jamaica, she took care of everything else, and she was just financially a wizard. And that's the way it worked. I never asked her what she earned. I didn't want to know. Maybe it's just the Caribbean in us. And she never asked me that. We saved up together, in a way. We put money together. I used to give her the money, she'd save it up. And when we had our second lovely child, Rebecca, every year we would fly back to Jamaica in January around my birthday when it's cold in England and go and visit the family out there. There was never an argument about, oh, how much do you earn? Oh, how much do you earn? I like your argument. I'm an old trade union man with a GMB. I like your argument. But there was never an argument.
But how do you manage your family, your household budget, if you don't know how much income you've got?
Well, it's quite easy. Obviously, being an old trade union man, I sort of know what people earn. We know what the wages are. It's our job to know. But it's just something we never spoke, maybe because I come from the streets, out of the children's home. It was just never something that got across the dining table. The only thing we would do when we got back from Jamaica after 4 weeks out there, we would start planning for the next year. It was a treat for the kids to see their family and the relatives in Jamaica.
So would you pay for the airfares 1 year and she would pay the next year? Was that how it would work?
No, I used to pay the mortgage. That was my job. I can't call it a job. It was my job. The mortgage and the house insurance, that was down to me completely. And it was always, in fact, we paid off for the house in 15 years. It worked. I remember paying off £44,857, and that ended the bloody mortgage. So that took a burden away from us, because that then left a bit more money around. And obviously with my daughters growing up, they needed more things and that. So I did it that way. And there is a way. And I never once turned around and said to Dawn, let me see your bank statement. That never occurred. It's just something, maybe us Caribbean people are different.
Well, as we say, it's different strokes for different folks, isn't it? Well, it obviously worked for you, so who am I or anybody else to criticise the way that you managed it all?
Well, it's worked for a lot of people, that I know within our community. It worked well.
Yeah.
Sometimes the husband could only get a job as a forklift driver. Well, he's not going to earn the same money as someone that's working in the Ministry of Defence, Crown Prosecution Service. You with me?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've driven a forklift in my time, and they're not easy things to drive, particularly when it's sort of rear-wheel drive.
I've had to load my own lorries. The forklift driver's gone off sick or something, and I've had to load it with... But mind you, I'll be honest with you and your wonderful listeners that do night haulage. Sometimes I prefer to load my own lorry because I'd strap it down and know it was secure. But no, it's just to say it's a wonderful conversation you're having, because there is a lot of squabbles in families over money.
Simon, thank you for your contribution to it. We will continue it. Lynn says, it wasn't until my ex-husband and I divorced after 28 years together that I came to know his income and he knowing mine. In all... Oh, no, it ends there, unfortunately. I was hoping there's going to be a big story there. Let's go to Sarah, who's in Hampstead. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to say?
It was a really interesting conversation. I think one part of it that's important is also the cultural aspect. I think so much of this is cultural. I come from a rather patriarchal background. And so it's just expected that a man would be the breadwinner and would be providing for the household. So this idea that there'd be sort of competition between me and my partner is really, it's just not something that I've ever considered, because it's just a given that my partner would have to earn more than me.
But you laughed at that, so I felt able to laugh at it too. But does that sort of annoy you a bit?
Well, no, because, from my perspective, it's a good position to be in, to want to be taken care of, right? So well, yeah, because I'm a high earner myself in my own right. I work in the city, so I have that financial independence for myself. But sort of the household view is my money is my money, his money is our money.
Spoken like a true woman.
Which I know is really old-fashioned, and I totally accept that we don't live in a world anymore where that sort of one sort of man can just the head of the household can go out there and earn for the entire family. But I think again it comes back to culture, because I would never look for a match where that wasn't a mindset in my partner.
I wonder how much, because there are still arranged marriages in this country, and I wonder how much the parents who do that actually look at the earning potential of the future husband and think, well, that's more important than looks, or whether they actually really can get to love each other, but he will always be able to provide for the daughter.
Yeah, potentially. I think that I don't necessarily think it's about the actual money. I think a lot of it is also just knowing that individual, in this case the man, he has the capability and the wits about him and the resources, the skills to actually move forward in life. Because I think, from my perspective, very personal, but I just can't see a situation where my partner doesn't have the resources or the capabilities to make more money than me. I would really kind of look down on him if he didn't.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Another text here from Charlotte, who says, I do understand a big differential in salaries causing friendships to end, simply because you end up with very different budgets for nights out, holidays, or even just lifestyle. I think that's true in friendship circles, where if one of the friendship circle is earning a dramatic amount more than anybody else, I think they probably feel under pressure to buy all of the rounds of drinks or pay for the meal, etc. And then, but that can cause problems on the other side, can't it? Because the other people might feel a bit insulted that they do that, whereas the person that's doing it will think, well, that's what they expect me to do. But there can be some really big misunderstandings unless people actually talk about it. I think that's probably, although you see, Simon there from Tottenham did not talk to his wife about how much he earned, and she didn't talk to him about how much she earned. And I think that, it can work for some people, but I still think that is a little bit weird. And in the modern society, I would have thought it's pretty unusual. But prove me wrong. You've got 14 minutes to do so. It's 9:46.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
As the Met Police open an investigation into Peter Mandelson, what does it say about Keir Starmer that he made him our ambassador to Washington? And is Ryanair about to ban jeans?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
You know that
Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 9:49. Sadie says, my husband earns double my salary. My salary is less than the average. It doesn't matter to either of us. It has never been an issue in the 26 years together. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, Sadie, because I would like to think that would be the same in most relationships, but I really do wonder whether there's often some sort of underlying resentment sometimes and how that eats away at the relationship. And in the end, it all comes to grief. Let's go to another text. This is from Carol. Iain, my husband and I have had a joint account for 40 years since we were kids. Surely sharing finances is important and salary difference shouldn't come into the equation. It would only cause friction. It's all about working together. Well, that's absolutely right. In an ideal world, that would be the case. Let's go to Annie, who's a new caller in Lewisham. Annie, hi.
Hi, Iain.
Hi, what would you like to say?
So this is a very interesting topic. I earn 3 times more than my partner, but my partner has more than 3 times savings than mine.
And do you operate separate accounts or joint accounts? Or how does it work?
I actually asked him to take care of my savings because I don't have the discipline, and he's just very clever and witty with, investments and bank accounts with interest. So I do ask him. I look out. I ask him to guide me with savings, and it's just marvelous.
Is there not a little bit of you that thinks, yes, but what if it all goes wrong?
No, but the thing is, there's the trust that, you are, as you mentioned, you work together. So money is just like an object. So, there's trust, and that's the reason why I actually entrust the savings with him, and I'm sure if hopefully it doesn't happen, all falls apart, then he will be very honest to part the money or give the money back. But 6 years we've been together, and we've been doing this like for the longest time, and we were able to get our flat because he saved up for us with our savings, with our money. So I'm really thankful, and I look up to him in terms of money.
Yeah, well, some people are good at handling money, and others are absolutely useless at handling money. And sort of as soon as they get it, it goes out again.
Exactly.
Are you one of those people, Annie?
True. Yes, that is very me.
And so there's not even a little bit of you that thinks, am I doing the right thing here? You just have complete trust, which I think is a great thing in many ways.
Yes, I think that is his skill. That's what he contributes into, our finances together. He makes sure that the money is kept. He has the discipline. So, yeah.
Well, what could be better? Annie, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. See, it's almost refreshing when you hear a call like that, isn't it? Because you sort of watch dramas on TV or Netflix or whatever, and that there's always something that goes wrong, whether it's some sort of financial mismanagement or there's something wrong in the relationship and it all breaks down because of a lack of trust. And then you hear somebody who has complete trust in her partner to do the right thing, even if they, God forbid, split up, she actually trusts him to do the right thing by her financially. There'll be many people listening who've been in that situation, and it's all come to grief, I suppose. But it's always nice to hear a positive story, isn't it? Joe says, I'm a gay man in my 30s. Although I wasn't aware of my ex's exact salary, he certainly earned more than me, but still poorly managed money and sometimes asked me to cover him. This mismatch of attitude to finances was one contributing factor of why I left. It just doesn't work in the long term if you're not both on the same page. Well, it comes back to that word trust again, doesn't it? If you can't trust your partner, to handle money in the same way that you do and have a responsible attitude to it, it's never going to work in the long term, is it? Which is such a shame that it has to be money that is at the. I go back to the phrase that I used at the beginning of the hour. Money is the root of all evil. And as my mother always used to say, never a lender or a borrower be. Is that a line from Shakespeare? I think it is, but I don't know which play. I'm looking through the window. Nobody is very literate through there. They have no clue. Yeah, William Shakespeare, famous writer. Oh, yeah, there's a little flicker of recognition there from a couple of them. Woody says, is he a dancer? Oh, dear. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Where's that from? Hamlet. See, I've never read it, but right. Jay says, regarding money, I have a group of friends who all earn significantly more than me, and the way they socialise made it hard, almost impossible to keep up, and I felt a sense of shame. Was really hard over many years as distance grew. Eventually swallowed my pride and was honest about money. Didn't fix the 5 years I drifted, but massively improved how things are now and will be in the future. Communication and honesty is the key, but the shame and awkwardness was there. I mean, that can work both ways, can't it? I remember that Harry Enfield sketch with the Brummie, I'm considerably richer than Yow. It was a very, Caelan's shaking his, no, before your time. It was a very funny sketch. And I think if you are somebody who knows that you earn far more than a friend and you actually highlight that fact, I mean, it's shameful, isn't it, actually? It is so narcissistic. It's the sort of thing that Donald Trump probably does, although we're never quite sure how rich he actually is. But I'd really wonder whether that sort of thing. I mean, why would you want to stay friends with that, where you go round for a dinner party and all they can do is, or all he or she can do, is brag about the money that they earn? I wouldn't want to stay friends with somebody like that, would you? Because, I mean, money can be a wonderful thing. It provides your security. It is your safety net. But you don't need to be told by somebody that they earn 3 times what you do. I mean, fine, if you're having a relevant discussion, you can... Oh, somebody says here it was The Merchant of Venice, Chris. No, he's sticking by his guns. He says it's Hamlet. It would fit with The Merchant of Venice. So I actually played Shylock in The Merchant of Venice at school when we did it as a play, which won't come as a surprise to many people, I imagine. But, I mean, that whole phrase, neither a borrower nor a lender be, well, if we actually stuck to that, we wouldn't really have much of a financial system, would we? We certainly wouldn't have a government, because governments always borrow a huge amount of money. No, somebody else is saying it's The Merchant of Venice. No, Chris he's vehemently shaking his head here and is insisting that it's Hamlet. I don't know. I really don't know. I've never actually, apart from Merchant of Venice, I've never actually read any of Shakespeare's plays from one end to the other, mainly because I don't really understand them, which probably tells you all you need to know about me. Well, thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion and podcasts. And there's a new episode of Where Politics Meets History with me and Tessa Dunlop. Obviously, we spend a lot of time talking about Peter Mandelson, and that will drop on your phones if you subscribe at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And you can download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, it's Ben Kentish.
Iain, thank you very, very much indeed. Yes, hello there. A good evening to you. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC. On tonight's show,
I cannot understand why half an hour ago the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom did not just apologise and say that Peter Mandelson should be subject to accountability.